runway as a coach in the NBA before he is potentially unemployed, unless something wild happens prior to 2031. I think this is a no-brainer for the Utah Jazz. I think this is a really interesting decision from Will himself, and I'll tell you why. We'll get into it on the show today. 1 week from today is the next day that is interesting for the fan base of the Utah Jazz. NBA Draft Lottery coming up 1 week from this Monday, next Monday, and we will have it live for you during the 5 o'clock hour of this radio show. So that's when we will learn where the Utah Jazz will select, and then we'll have a pretty good idea of who the Jazz are going to be able to pick based off of simply their positioning. It does seem like the top five in order is somewhat of a consensus. Of course, the NBA draft comes around June the 25th. We will have great NBA draft coverage that night, potentially out and about on location for Jazz fans to come hang out with us to watch the first round of the NBA draft. Remember, NBA draft is now a two-day event. It used to be that way. So you got round one on the 25th and round two on the 26th. The second round will actually be during our regular scheduled programming on the 26th. So we'll kind of stay frosty, keep an eye to find out what the Jazz are going to do because they have a couple of second-round picks as well. So some Jazz news coming down today. An unbelievable weekend of playoff action in both the NBA and the NHL. A couple of Game 7s in the NHL saw some unbelievable finishes, hearts and mouths to use a soccer term. Both the Stars and the Jets needed late-game heroics to get past the Avalanche and the Blues, and now those two teams advance on for round two. The Panthers and the Maple Leafs will play tonight. It is the first game of the second round as those two teams have advanced. In the world of pro basketball, the second round begins tonight as well. Out east at 5 o'clock on TNT, the New York Knicks take their act on the road to the TD Garden to take on the Boston Celtics. This could not be a worse matchup for the Knicks. We'll get into it, of course, in playoffs. And then the Nuggets, after embarrassing the L.A. Clippers at Ball Arena, Game 7 over the weekend, they advance on to take on the number one seed out of the West, Oklahoma City Thunder, at Paycom Center in OKC, Oklahoma. So a couple of Game 1s tonight in the world of pro basketball. An unbelievable gutty win from Stephen Curry, from Jimmy Butler, from Draymond Green, the Golden State Warriors, Game 7 on the road against the Rockets. And then I think the Cavs are in trouble. We'll tell you why. The Pacers just have a bunch of pit bulls on the perimeter, a bunch of tough, physical, big guards that like to play defense. And Donovan Mitchell is a really interesting playoff case study because it's not fair to say he's a shrinking violet come playoff time. I've seen him drop to half 100, but I've also seen him just disappear. So we'll get to what this could mean for Donovan moving forward. And then out west, we have a little bit of a rematch when it comes to Draymond Green and Rudy Gobert, two people, two basketball players that don't like each other at all. So the NBA playoffs continue to be really, really cool. We have some breaking news right out of the gates. And I was informed this, by the way, by one Britton Covey at the spring game. But I'm a gentleman. I do not like to break the trust of our guy. So saw Britton Covey at the Forever 22 game, the Utah football spring game. And, of course, his time in Philadelphia has come to an end. He gets a Super Bowl ring, and he lands in a great spot. Britton Covey is now an L.A. Ram with a one-year deal. Utah football brings in a wide receiver via the transfer portal. And we do have some RSL news as well, maybe some reinforcements on the way. RSL went up to Vancouver and lost over the weekend. So a ton to do on the show. If you missed the press conference announcing Will Hardy's contract extension, we're going to bring some of that sound to you from Will and some of the other decision makers on the program today. Tom Haberstroh joins the show today as Tommy wrote a piece over the weekend, and Tommy is all about the numbers, is all about the data. And I'm going to tell Tom that I think James Harden is potentially the most pathetic clutch player in the history of NBA basketball, and Tom's going to throw a bunch of numbers at me that indicate that I might be wrong. But James Harden, again, over the weekend, I know he had a number of assists, but he just did not try to guard it all. He was not engaged to try to get his own offense. Another Game 7 failure from James Harden. We'll get Tommy's take on the news that Will Hardy has a brand-new contract. And then after Tom stops by, it's an hour in studio with Richard Smith. Smitty will stop by. He was at Black Desert last week, over the weekend, for the LPGA Championship event. So we'll do some NBA, and we'll see how Smitty's experience was down south at the golf tournament was. And then we're not sure who our RSL guest will be today, which means it's probably going to be Trey. Fair enough?
Which that's kind of what I'm hoping for, just to be clear.
You're hoping for Trey?
Yeah.
Don't say that. Like,
that might be like the best guess possible scenario. Like we had Deontay Wilder last Friday, right? Yeah, I think Trey Fitzgerald next.
How are you
Deontay and Trey? A lot of similarities.
How are you bridging the gap between those two people? I'd love to hear this.
Yeah, I think that's maybe the joke they're in.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm excited for that.
You know what?
Actually.
I'm not going to make a short joke either. Deontay 6'7". I'm not going to do that to our guy. But the problem is, since you said out loud into the microphone that you're excited for it to be Trey, that's just going to go to his head.
So maybe we get someone else?
Yeah, I mean, let's get anybody else outside of Trey. But the days where we have an RSL guest slotted and we don't hear back, and it probably means Trey is trying to make space for himself to be able to come on the show.
I was going to say also, Nuggets, sometimes the timing aligns when we don't get an RSL guest as well.
I don't want to talk to Trey about anything other than RSL because he cannot take his bias. He can't remove it. So, it's, yes, we're going to win the championship again. Jokic is the greatest of all time. Whenever he goes into the space of any other content than RSL, I simply just cut him off.
Yeah, it's fair. It's fair. But, hey, to be clear, while we've given him the space to do that, the year he went really hard on it, they did come away with the ring.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, that's fair. All right, so we'll see who joins us to talk a little soccer later, but a lot of basketball, a lot of football, some NFL offseason, some Utah football transfer portal additions. Our first guest will be Tom Haberstroh. We are going to bring you some sound from the Will Hardy press conference. But before we get to all of that, on this cloudy and rainy Monday afternoon, it is time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN 700 and run your game with Prize Picks.
Cash in on the basketball playoffs with Prize Picks. Don't miss your last chance to add your favorite players from the court to your Prize Picks lineup. Whether it's points, rebounds, or assists, take your pick of more or less for your shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash today. Turn your playoff hot takes into tickets to basketball's championship series, starting with a play-in round. Every lineup you make on Prize Picks will enter you into the Take-Two ticket sweepstakes, which could get you and a +1 a VIP trip to the ship. So here's what you do. You download that Prize Picks app today. You use the promo code ESPN700 at checkout, and they're going to hook you up with $50 when you play your first $5 bet. Do not even have to win the bet to get to 50. It is on the house. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700. You get $50 when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game all season long. All right, tonight I am going more on Jason Tatum, 27.5 points. I'm going less on Russell Westbrook, 11 points. I'll take less on Porzingis, 5.5, 3-point shots attempted. And go ahead and give me more on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 35 points and assists combined. So there you go, our good friends at Prize Picks. All right, oftentimes in this business, you wake up to unexpected news. You plan out a show, you want to do this, you want to do that, and then a piece of news comes down and it kind of causes you to throw out the rundown and reconsider what we're going to do. So Utah Jazz announced today that they have agreed to a new multi-year contract extension with their head coach, Will Hardy, that runs through the 2031 season. Will is 37 years old. Of course, he was hired 2022 after Quinn Snyder decided he did not want to work for this new ownership group. So far, Will has compiled a record of 85 wins, 161 losses with no playoff appearances, 37 wins year one when he actually had some adults on the roster, 31 last year, and then 17 this season. By far the worst record in franchise history and the worst record in the NBA this season. So interesting timing of this and interesting dynamics for a few reasons. So let's get into it. So, of course, Greg Popovich, unfortunately, has had to step down as the head coach of the San Antonio Spurs. And we actually heard from Coach Pop today. He spoke for the first time since November of 2024. And I'm not going to lie, that was hard to watch. It didn't look like the Greg Popovich that we've all come to know and come to expect. He looked like a guy that's been through a tremendous trial as far as the past 2 or 3 years. Now, remember, it's not just his own personal health. Coach Pop lost his wife, sadly, a few years back. Then he had the stroke, and he did not look like himself today. It was actually somewhat sad in my estimation. I'm thrilled that he's getting better, and I'm thrilled for him that he can continue in a role with that organization as the president of the Spurs. He was flanked by some of the legends. We had Tim Duncan on one side, Manu Ginobili on the other. But one of the reasons I bring this up when it comes to the Popovich news is I'm not going to lie, when Greg Popovich suffered his stroke and stepped away from the team, I heard from more than a few people around pro basketball pontificating on the possibility of Will Hardy leaving the Utah Jazz and taking the job of head coach of the San Antonio Spurs. Now, of course, Will is under contract next year. Well, now Will's under contract through 2031, but prior to today, Will was under contract next year and the year after. It was kind of a unique contract, just as far as the format goes, where it was a 5-year deal, 3 years guaranteed, then 2 team options. When it became pretty clear that Will's a pretty sharp guy and the Jazz just don't really have good basketball players, and it's hard to win basketball games when you don't have players that are good at playing basketball. There's your analysis for the day. You can't really put much on the head coach, but I'll get back to that in a moment. So when it became clear that this was going to be a long game proposition and that Team 49 year one with some veteran players actually kind of overshot expectations, and so the conversation was like, okay, are they a player or two away from actually being much better than we all expected? And that was when Bobby Marks came on our radio show and broke the news that the Jazz thought they had a deal in place to acquire Drew Holiday from Portland, but Drew Holiday did not want to play here because he was in the mood to win championships, and so he went to Boston. And then there were conversations that prior to Kristaps Porzingis landing in Boston, Ryan Smith and the front office thought they could have had a deal to bring Porzingis in. Danny Ainge, postseason media, big game hunting. You guys all remember the deal. So for a minute, there was a conversation about, wait, could they really expedite this? And I have no idea who over there actually decided to say out loud, let's go ahead and trade for Paul George or sign Paul George and trade for Mikal Bridges, as if that was any possibility at all. Delusions of grandeur. But hey, I guess speak it into existence. That's what the kids do now. And maybe sometimes it happens and boom, you see a Reiki healer and your life changes. I don't know. I don't speak the language. But when it became clear that best laid plans aside, this was going to have to be a long game, the front office and the ownership group decided that they would pick up Will's option next year, year 4 and year 5. Okay, so giving another 2 years of runway before they had to make a decision on Will, but in my opinion, more poignantly, before Will had to make a decision on them. And I still believe Will has a decision to make on them, okay? That's what makes today a little bit surprising. So again, Popovich steps down. Unfortunately, he's not well. A lot of people around pro basketball wondering if the San Antonio Spurs would reach out to the Utah Jazz to try to engage in some sort of conversation to get Will out of here, to have him become the heir apparent to Greg Popovich. Ironically enough, during Quinn Snyder's last year here, longtime listeners of the program, hello, how are you? Thank you. You might remember Tim McMahon hopping on the show and alluding to the fact that he's hearing Quinn is going to leave the Jazz to take over for Greg Popovich. Now, funny thing happened on the way, right, to this end game and this final kind of landing of the plane, because then San Antonio won the lottery and they drafted Victor Wembanyama, which seemed to kind of re-energize Greg Popovich, just like drafting Tim Duncan did. Obviously the Spurs were able to get David Robinson with a number 1 overall pick. We can talk about Spurs culture all you want, all the championships they've won all you want. None of that happens without their lot of lottery luck, which they've had plenty of with David Robinson, Tim Duncan, Victor Wembanyama. Spurs get Wembanyama. Popovich realizes he now has the next big thing in basketball on his team, and he decides to stay, and he even signs another contract to continue on as the head coach. So, Quinn elects to take a year away. I still think if he waited another 4 or 5 months, he currently would be the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks, but he takes the Atlanta job. Popovich grabs Wembanyama, and so that narrative goes out the window. And so this year, after Popovich decided to step down because of the health situation, a lot of conversation about whether or not they would try to contact the Jazz about bringing Will Hardy in as their next head coach. And now, I don't know how much of that motivated the Utah Jazz to essentially do this right now. And I don't know how much of this messaging today. So the Spurs are going with Mitch Johnson as the team's new head coach. He's been an assistant coach for Pop for, I think, 10 years now. And 38 years old, very well respected by people in the organization. So San Antonio has their head coach. So the timing of it today, I think, is interesting for a couple of different reasons. I really don't know. We'll have to get our ESPN stats and info group on this. Will Hardy is going to get 9 years, a 9-year runway of guaranteed money to coach this team with no guarantees that he's going to have good players. He's going to get 9 years unless something crazy goes down. Now, of course, we see it all the time in the world of coaching. And the reason their contracts are structured like this is most of these guys are hired to be fired. And when you lose your job, the only silver lining, if you're a coach, now in either college or pro, is you're paid millions of dollars not to work. It's actually not a bad gig. So this is a tremendous gesture from Jazz ownership and the Jazz front office, indicating that they believe that Will is the guy to lead this team moving forward. I am surprised that Will decided to do this. Because as I've talked about throughout the course of the end of the regular season and throughout the course of the start of the postseason, whenever I hear some of these playoff droughts, whenever I hear some of these teams that are either in the postseason now or barely made it in for the first time in a long, long time, it just reminds me of how spoiled we've been with the competitive culture that the Millers built for a long, long time with a Utah Jazz team that more often than not has been very competitive consistently. Yes, we've never had a championship. Yes, there were some down years. Yes, there were some missteps. Yes, there were some playoff failures, but we have been lucky to have really good basketball in Utah for basically almost 50 years. And there is part of me that believes we're in the early stages of what could be a very, very long game in a way that we've never experienced it before. The Charlotte Hornets have gone 21 seasons between playoff victories. The Sacramento Kings, 21 seasons between playoff victories. The last time the Detroit Pistons won a playoff game at home was 2008. It's been 15 years since the Magic won an NBA playoff series. Can you believe it's been a decade since the Chicago Bulls won a playoff series? Even the Wizards won a playoff series prior to the Bulls, but it's been 8 years for them. 8 years for the Spurs. And we're coming up on the 4th year of a rebuild for the Utah Jazz. And if you're watching the NBA playoffs and if you're juxtaposing these teams to what the Jazz are now, you're aware that they are not even close to competitiveness. They're just not. They're not one Cooper flag away. Quite frankly, they're not 2 pieces away. Quite frankly, they're probably 4 or 5 high-quality pieces away, combined with the good players they have on the roster. And there aren't many, but there might be 2 or 3. Lowry, Walker, and then after that, who knows? But they need a ton of help. And if you're Will Hardy, you're a guy that around the landscape of pro basketball carries a lot of cachet and a lot of respect. You could take another job if you wanted to. So I viewed this today as a real gesture from the Jazz ownership and their front office and a real signal of belief that you're our guy, Will. But I believe this to be a very calculated and dangerous move from Will Hardy to believe in what's going on over there with not a lot of tangible proof in front of them. All these coaches at the end of the day are known for their win and loss record, and nobody gives a rip about the context, okay? So Will at this point, 85 wins, 161 losses. They are not going to be good next year, and if I had to guess, the year after that, it's probably going to be another whole, like, we're developing young players. And at what point does Will look around and get sick of entering gunfights with a knife every night when the other coach actually has legitimate NBA talent and they're serious about winning, and Will's asked to continue to develop young players? So, interesting news. We will bring you some sound from said presser coming up on the other side. We'll get the thoughts of Tom Haberstroh on this news today, and then we're going to bring in Richard Smith for an hour. Our RSL guest is fluid, which means it's probably Trey. So, I don't know. We'll see. But it is The Drive on a Monday, and it's great to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. Will Hardy apparently not a rambling man, huh? See what I did there? Right out of the gates?
Maybe he is a 22-minute presser.
Well, isn't the very definition of rambling man somebody who wants to go up several places? And
yeah,
do you understand the joke that I was trying to make? Or
a little more literal, yeah.
Did it go over your head?
A little bit. I was thinking more from rambling. No,
that's fair.
He went on.
I think we're both correct. And look, I apologize. My humor can be a little highbrow. It can be a little, listeners say intellectual. I'm not comfortable with that, but whatever. I don't say that. Listeners say it. It's kind of awkward.
Yeah, my humor is very lowbrow. It's very like I'm a prairie boy.
Now, don't be hard on yourself. Come on.
I think you alluded. Just kidding.
No, I wasn't alluding to anything. You got your Wrangler T-shirt on today. Did you get that with a pack of cigs though?
There you go.
Nice.
No cigs. That's a hard stop at this point of my life.
I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
I'm proud of you. All right. Will Hardy was an. Oh, you know what, Porter? Give me your thoughts on, kind of the way I started the show, where I view this as a tremendous gesture from Jazz ownership and the front office. I mean, no coach gets a 9-year runway when you haven't won at a high level. I mean, this to me feels like a little bit of a no-brainer because I think Will's very bright, but I do view this as a little bit of a risk from Will. Tell me what you think.
Yeah, no, I mean, as you said, maybe a risk from Will in the sense that you just never know. You never know when a team is going to be able to strike when the iron's hot on a big free agent or hit on a draft pick, or when you hit on a draft pick and he ends up having a career plagued with injuries, a la Grant Hill. Like, there's just so many variables in the NBA that you can't account for that, hey, isn't taking any job a risk. I don't know that one that's getting this kind of salary is super risky in spite of, the record, the percentage, the number that goes next to your name, which, as you said, yeah, that's huge when you're on the job market, when you're looking back on your career. But it does appear that Will Hardy is in good faith, not worried about that at the moment. He's just worried about what's going on here with the Jazz, and for the Jazz to have the kind of what clearly shows the kind of faith in Will to sign him to this extension. Looks like both parties are on the same page, which, as you mentioned, it's hard to be when you're in a position like this. So much losing, so much that you're not used to as an organization over the last 2 years. In this regard, they're handling it, I think, really well.
I just have to wonder what will, if we fast forward 2-3 years and they're not close, you know what I mean? I just have to wonder what's going to go through his mind.
Well, and then how much does that, right, maybe he's on the job market, how much does that affect how he's viewed around the league? I think there's folks here that are very, very high on Will Hardy, especially in the Jazz front office, and I think rightfully so. But yeah, at a certain point, you, and I'm saying this as Will, start looking after yourself. He hasn't done that yet, which is pretty commendable, and the Jazz front office are taking note.
So the weather's a little chilly today. We're going to get a little rain tonight and tomorrow, but it is time to start thinking about your lawn. And IFA Country Stores has everything you need to care for your lawn, no matter its size or shape. Their 4+ lawn care program can promote healthy green grass this summer. Visit with their team of Pro Turf and landscape consultants that help provide products and services to local baseball, soccer fields, golf courses, parks, and other city properties throughout Utah. It's the same knowledge and care that they can share with you about your yard, only online, IFA, and online at ifa.coop. And in case you missed it earlier today, here's a portion of the press conference announcing the contract extension for Will Hardy.
Just want to ask from your perspective, like how this unfolds to go, how the contract negotiations unfold, who represents you, and kind of how those conversations happen.
Yeah, I mean, I have an agent like most or all coaches. Ryan, Danny, and Justin are the ones that communicate with them, Justin being the primary communicator. These are conversations that happen over a period of time. It's not a one-day thing. And so they speak about the kind of the aim of the program and what their thoughts are. I'm fortunate that I work for this group. I think Ryan, Ashley, Danny, Justin have been incredibly good to me from the first day. We've been very aligned the entire way through this process, and so calling it a negotiation, that word sometimes draws up this thought in your mind like it's a contentious thing back and forth, and it's not. I'm very proud to be the coach of the Utah Jazz, so this is something that everybody was really excited about.
Brian Miller?
Hey, Will. 6 years is a long time. It'll be, like 9 years when this thing's all done. How much does that help you just as you're looking forward to long-term plans, future, to be like, okay, I will be here. This is my job for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I think that's ultimately a big sigh of relief for any coach. We all see every day that this business is not, it's not one where you see a ton of coaches getting long-term commitments. I think ultimately the goal is to continue to build this program and ultimately hang a banner at Delta Center. And to get a commitment of that length shows the belief that our group has in our coaching staff, and so it makes you feel the confidence from them. That's not something that I've ever doubted. I think the communication that we've had the entire first 3 years, I've felt that I have the confidence of our group, but to get that, quote unquote, put on paper is definitely meaningful. I'm all in on the Utah Jazz. I'm incredibly humbled and grateful to have this opportunity. There are very few moments where I'm really at a loss for words, and this is one of those where the perspective on all of it, the understanding of the commitment that they're making to me and to our staff is really humbling. And we're excited to continue to work. I love representing this organization. I love representing our community and our fan base. So it's a really exciting day.
Brian here.
Yeah, Coach, you have a real close connection with the guys you mentioned, Ryan, Danny, Justin, and yourself. You guys hang out together, play golf together. How important is that to you to have that connection with those guys? I don't know if that exists in a lot of other NBA coaching positions.
Yeah, I think it's what sets us apart is the alignment that we have every day. It's one constant conversation. I think I've said publicly, I'm not sure in 3 years we've ever scheduled a meeting because we don't need to. The conversation is ongoing. We all spend so much time together and are intentional about making sure we all spend time together that the perspective is always there for all four of us. I understand the things that they're thinking about, the things that they're worried about, the things that they may be focused on in the current moment, and they understand the things that I'm worried about and focused on. So I think that connection allows us to navigate what is a hard landscape in professional sports. It's very much a business that is judged and reacted to in sort of an A or F manner. It's either great or it's terrible. And I think that it allows us to really block out all of that noise and stay focused on, the intent of our group and why we're doing what we're doing. I couldn't be luckier to have three people like that I get to work with every day, because like you said, it's not lost on me that this is not normal.
Tony Jones.
Coach. What does it mean for you that, this is, been able to get done, in this manner, just kind of as efficiently as it has been done? And as a secondary question, what's been, some of your favorite moments in these first few years of your tenure?
Yeah, it means a lot to get this done and sort of put this part behind us. There's so much work to be done. We have, a lot that we have to do as a staff and as an organization moving forward to get where we want to get to. And so to have this element solidified in the moment is definitely relieving and allows us to focus on the things that we need to focus on. Memories of the first 3 years that's a hard one to pinpoint because I go back to, the first press conference when I got the job and meeting all of you for the first time and sort of starting to initially feel the weight and responsibility of this job, but also feel the passion and the support of our fan base. The first home game at Delta Center was a moment that I'll never forget. Little things like the first time the team brought it in at the end of practice and training camp, and you realize, like, wait, I'm the head coach. I'm the one that's supposed to talk right now. But also, more than that, it's the time spent with everybody that's in our travel party. There's so much time behind the scenes, on the planes, on the buses. There's so many people who do incredible work for us who get no credit publicly, and forging those relationships along with the relationships with our players. It's a day like today when the news comes out and you're getting texts from guys that were on the team my first year here. I was a 34-year-old first-time head coach, and they let me coach them, and they embraced me as the head coach, and they were ultimately the ones that fed into my confidence in this job because of the way that they approached me every day. The games are always fun, but ultimately I think that this job and coaching in general, it's the relationships and the time spent are the things that run through your head when you really look back on it all. And so I'm very, very grateful that I've been surrounded by and am still surrounded by so many amazing people.
Hey, Will, the first extension kind of, gave a glimpse that you would be here kind of through that first rebuilding part of the rebuild or first section of the rebuild of this team. And this extension gives you an opportunity to kind of look beyond what would be the rebuild and start sort of what it would look like when you guys are maybe trying for contention. And I'm wondering, what are your worries, concerns, thoughts about how maybe your job will change once it shifts?
Yeah, it's not something that I'm concerned about. I think that's what we all want. You want to be in the big game. You want to be in the pressure situation. You want to be competing for the championship. That's what we're all hunting. And I do recognize that there will be a lot of changes for all of us as our team continues to grow. It's not just me, it's the assistant coaches, it's the players, it's the front office, it's Ryan and Ashley. Like, the feelings and the emotions attached to it all will be a little bit different. And I'm excited for that. Like, I'm excited for our fan base to pack the building for a big playoff game. I think that's what we're all anxious for and excited for. Like, I watch these playoff games at night and you're just staring at the screen going, that's what I want. And that's what we're building towards. Like, we're a group that's very committed to the process of building a championship level team. And we said in the beginning, and we will continue to say, that does not mean that there aren't hard moments. But I think that those hard moments are ultimately what makes it all worth it in the end. So I don't really have concerns about my job changing as we continue to move forward, because I think that's ultimately what you sign up for when you're a head coach in this league. Is things are constantly changing around you, and you have to be a steady force throughout all that change.
Andy?
Two questions for you. First, with the NBA lottery, are you headed out to Chicago for that, or what's your plan with that?
Yes, I will be in Chicago.
And then wanted to ask, as you watch playoff basketball, and we talked about this before, it's a different style of basketball than regular season basketball. How do you think your current team and young players especially are equipped to kind of handle what we've seen in some really tough and close playoff games so far?
Yeah, I think our young players are on the right path of growing towards being ready for those. The reality is this season we weren't ready for that level. And some of that is outside of their control, because there is an element of some experience, but also some physical maturity and some of those things that stand out in some of these games. We're seeing a really, really physical playoffs to this point. But the part that I'm most excited about is that ultimately, in my experience in the playoffs and continuing to watch it all unfold, your mental toughness and your mindset is the most important thing to get through the playoffs, because there are big emotional swings. You're physically exhausted and you're getting tested every single night. And I think that our group is building that resilience and continuing to improve and work on our mindset every single day, because that's what it's going to take. If you watch the series, after one game, the reactions are generally, this team is playing great, this other team is playing poorly. Golden State loses 2 games in a row and everybody's sort of writing them off, and they go win Game 7 on the road. And yes, it's because of the ability of their players, but more than that, it seems like it's because of the mindset of their players. And that's the thing that we have to continue to address as a group as we grow. Physical things are easier to measure. How strong you are, how high you can jump, how many shots you make out of a certain number, like those things are easy to measure. Your mindset's hard to measure. And so that's the thing we have to monitor really closely as a group as we keep going.
Yeah, you mentioned these are hard to come by this season, but man, the fans, every time I went to a game, they're packing the arena. Which surprised me every time I showed up, that many people were there to watch. What do you want to say to them of how they supported you, maybe where you are in this process?
Yeah, my message to our fan base first and foremost is thank you. Their support means the world to me. It means the world to our team, because we need them, and ultimately we're trying to conduct ourselves in a way that represents them. And you always want your fan base to be proud of how you're operating as a team. And I think that ultimately that's why they showed up every night. I give our fan base a lot of credit. They have perspective, and they understand what we're ultimately hunting, and they understand what we're doing to try to get there. And playing a lot of young players, trying to develop our young talent, the fan base understood that was going to be hard from a wins and losses standpoint at certain moments. But I do think that they continued to show up because they enjoyed watching our young players compete. There was not a lack of effort on the floor. There was not a lack of passion. I want to continue to thank them and to continue to tell them and remind them that this is all going to be worth it. And growing these young players is going to give us the best chance to hang a banner at Delta Center. And I understand frustration in certain moments. I understand that some of the losses are hard, and especially when you cared so deeply about the team. But their support does not go unnoticed. I'm very grateful for our fan base and their approach, and this is all going to be worth it.
All right.
Well, as the season was ending, I asked pretty much on everyone on the roster, like, is Will a good coach? And how does he keep you guys accountable? And like the general consensus was, great coach. Everyone said glowing things about you, so that's nice. But the thing that stood out was that everyone was like, well, he'll call Lowry out in a film session or during a practice or during a game just as soon as he'll call out a two-way guy or Cody or Isaiah. And so that even playing field, is that a concerted effort kind of in your coaching philosophy and something that you want to continue?
Yeah, that's going to remain a core principle for us every single day. And that's because I believe ultimately everybody can improve. And secondly, we all want the same thing. We're all trying to win. My responsibility is to hold them accountable. It's not personal. I care very much about all of these guys as human beings. But when we're doing the basketball piece, we're trying to improve as a team. They're trying to improve individually. And it's also a credit to our veteran players, like you mentioned, Lowry, and he allows me to coach him hard in front of the team because he understands that allowing me to do that lets me coach the young players hard and not have them bat an eye. And we don't get into this situation of, well, you don't yell at him when he did this, he did this on that play and you didn't say anything. We want everybody to be held accountable to the same standards. And that's something that, I was fortunate to witness, up close and personal throughout my coaching career, the coaches that I've worked for. And I ultimately think it's the best way to build team cohesion is everybody understanding that the standards have to be the same for everybody. And just because you're on a different contract or you play more minutes doesn't mean that you get to just let things slide. And I want them to continue to want more for themselves. That's my responsibility. And if that means that in certain moments they're all mad at me, that's fine. That comes with the territory, and there's that can be good for a group as well. But our players deserve a lot of credit for how they've handled themselves. I'm very grateful that they allow me to coach them as hard as I do.
Eric, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, you mentioned having seen the coaches that you've worked for and learning from them, and kind of as the news recently that Pop won't be coming back to a coaching bench. I'm wondering how much of your coaching style philosophy was learned through him, and is he someone that you think about or talk to when, you get a big contract extension?
Yeah, I learned an incredible amount from Pop. I think he really set the foundation of values for me that you carry into your team. I also recognize that I'm not Pop and our personalities are not the same, and so I'm not trying to emulate Pop. I do think that the values system, though, is similar. That being said, he's taught me more than I could even explain. allowing me to be a part of his program and their program for 11 years, the opportunities that I was given there, getting to learn from him, getting to learn from the players, getting to learn from, countless assistant coaches that I got to work with and for while I was there, has ultimately shaped a ton of my coaching identity. But I do have to remain true to myself and do it my way and with my voice. So I'm forever grateful to him, that organization and all the coaches and players that I was around while I was there. There's way too many to name each of them by name right now. And yeah, of course, he's somebody that, I speak to. He's a mentor to me in a lot of ways. He's been a very prominent figure in my adult life. I was in San Antonio from age 22 to 33, which is a very formative part of my life. And so, yeah, getting to share the news with him is, that's a great moment. There's, other coaches as well that you get to share the news with, and you get congratulatory texts. It's one of the few moments where you take a moment and take a step back and think about the journey to this point and all the people that have been very impactful along the way. Pop obviously being the most prominent.
All right, there you go. Will Hardy addressing the media today after the news broke that he has agreed to a contract extension with the Utah Jazz going through the 2031 season. Ironically enough, the same day that we heard from Greg Popovich for the first time since November of 2024. We'll catch a quick break. We'll get to the 3 o'clock hour of the program, which starts with Tom Haberstroh and continues with Richard Smith. So a lot more reaction on this. We'll get to some college football transfer portal news. Landon King has a new home. We'll tell you where that is a little bit later on a Monday edition of The Drive right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. We got Smitty live in studio today. Spent 40 years with the Jazz front office in a number of different capacities. We'll do a little RSL later on. Landon King has a new home. He has transferred to Duke, former Utah tight end. But our next guest joins us on a very consistent basis with a lot to get to on a Monday afternoon. We welcome in Tom Haberstroh. Tommy, happy Monday, man. How we doing?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I'm well. So some unexpected news dropped in our market today as the Utah Jazz and Will Hardy have agreed to a multi-year contract extension through 2031. Now, as you know, when they signed Will in 2022, it was a 5-year deal, 3 guaranteed years, then 2 team options. They had already picked up both of those options. So prior to today, he was under contract through 2025. Now he's under contract through 2031. Tommy, he gets a 9-year runway. This doesn't happen often. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a great indication of the trust between the front office and Hardy. Despite the record, 17 and 65, you get a 6-year extension basically through 2031 after having the worst record in the NBA. This is very clear that everyone's on the same page of what this is all about, right? They all know what time it is that Hardy, given the personnel and the objective, which is very clear. You don't extend the head coach for having the worst record in the league unless that is the goal, or at least that is part of the plan. And Hardy has had to deal with a lot of in-and-out players, differing incentive structures where you would think that a guy with not just this year, but last year going 31 and 51, the year before that, 37-45, the Utah Jazz win count has gone down in each of the 3 years that Will Hardy has coached, but that's kind of all part of the plan. And they I think have the right process, and they are sticking by him in the same way that the Portland Trailblazers did the same thing with Chauncey Billups this offseason. And these organizations are, I think, looking after what Mark Daigneault and Ime Udoka did with Houston and saying, you know what? I think we should stick by our coach if he is demonstrating that he's about all the right things and getting the guys ready and all about development long term. We're not just going to let this guy go once things start getting good. We're going to stick by them and let them see through this. And I think it's a new day in the NBA where you're seeing guys get that opportunity. And on the other side, Will Hardy is in a profession in which Michael Malone and Taylor Jenkins get fired days before the postseason. So it's a very unusual coaching market right now. And I think it's an indication, it's a testament to Will Hardy and his professionalism that he was able to see this through enough to get to the other side. And that's really exciting if you're Will Hardy.
And I want to be very clear, in a profession where you are essentially hired to be fired, when an ownership group and a front office offers you this opportunity, you do not turn it down. But, Tom, I've been talking about this throughout the course of the past month or so. You know, when the playoffs roll around, you're always reminded about how many cities and how many organizations have had sometimes decades of futility and very long stretches in between competitive teams. We've never had that here. We just haven't. We've had 2 and 3 years of a Scott Layden pivot or a Dennis Lindsey or a Kevin O'Connor pivot and a Dennis Lindsey pivot, and pretty quickly have been able to get back to respectability and competitiveness. And I do not think we are close here now to seeing that happen anytime soon. So is there a part of this where Will Hardy is taking a little bit of a risk? Because from my prism, Will checks all the boxes. He's a great communicator. His players seem to like him. He has maximized every piece of talent he's had here. And I badly want to see what an NBA team with good players looks like coached by him. But there is a risk here about committing to this organization long-term where there's no guarantees on the horizon of talent landing in our market to allow the Jazz to get even close to where some of these Western Conference teams are. If we are honest and salient here, Tom, they are 3, 4, 5 pieces away from the Minnesotas and the Denvers and the Oklahoma cities. Is there a bit of a risk that's taken on Will's behalf, even though, again, with a profession full of so much volatility. If you have 9 years of runway, you take it no matter what. But is there a bit of a risk on Will's part here?
Sure. I think this is a riskless, or I guess a profession that there is no safe job. There is not. I mean, we just saw two teams that had basically been at the top or near the top of the Western Conference at one point this season, either the number 2 or the number 3 seed for much of the season, and they get fired. So nothing's guaranteed in this league, especially when we're coming off a season in which Taylor Jenkins and Michael Malone seemed like everything was fine and they were going through a little rough patch. But we're seeing Denver win 50 games with Michael Malone, and they let him go. Outside of Eric Spoelstra, there really isn't, I think. Now we're seeing Greg Popovich pass the torch over to Mitch Johnson. Eric Spoelstra in Miami is the longest tenured head coach in the NBA now. And I remember covering him in 2010, and he was just a baby. This league, if you're able to get this kind of buy-in from the front office, even if it's long-term with some team options, what have you, I think that's as close to stability as you're going to get. So Will Hardy, I think the grass is always greener in the NBA. You think that it would be better to be in a winning environment with the competitive juices flowing. Everyone wants to win. The priority is to win every game, but that also is very stressful. And a lot of times you butt heads with front offices. And it seems like Will Hardy's happy where he is in Utah, and I can't blame him for the security in a profession where there isn't much security. I mean, the Phoenix Suns they just let go James Jones and hired someone who is a longtime coach under Tom Izzo to be the GM. They fire Mike Budenholzer, they fire Frank Vogel, they cycle through head coaches. So I can understand why Will Hardy is opting for security rather than necessarily chasing the next big job that comes up, because certainly there's a lot of competition for those jobs. And as someone who lives in Charlotte, sometimes it's nice to know like where you're going to be for the next several years, even if it isn't a New York or a Miami or an LA, so to speak. I don't know what the NBA equivalent, maybe it is those teams, but I think happiness as an NBA head coach, I remember Stan Van Gundy talking recently about how on Le Batard's show, he was talking about, people were saying, hey, at least Stan, when you got let go in New Orleans or let go in Detroit, you had multiple years of millions of dollars guaranteed to you. How mad could you be? How upset could you be when you get fired? And he really was hard on this and was like, if you have any sort of pride, any organization that says, we don't want you here anymore, we think we can do better than you going forward, and we are willing to pay you millions of dollars to not have to deal with you every day, that still hurts. And it still hurts a lot. And so as much as we want to say, Will Hardy might be able to get a better job elsewhere, a winning situation, I understand the inclination to opt for security, even though they could fire him tomorrow. There is still the security of the front office that he's the only front office that he's had as a head coach. And it seems like they're all aligned. I can see why there's a little bit of risk, but every job in the NBA, in this profession, I think there's risk involved.
For sure. One more thing here. You agree with my premise that the Jazz are not close to being competitive. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was just thinking about this. Who is their Shai Gilgeous-Alexander?
They don't have one.
Who is their Devin Booker, right? No. The guy that, they're going to lose 70 games, but who's their guy that they can build around and say, okay, that is a young piece that you can envision a rebuild around. Evan Mobley, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Devin Booker. These are types of guys that I think you can't point to Lauri Markkanen and say that's their version of that, because Lauri is turning 28 years old this summer. And those guys, when they were coming up, they were 23, 24. And that's a huge difference. And so I think Lauri Markkanen is more likely to get moved, in my opinion, than being the franchise cornerstone, future star in the same way that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is for OKC.
Oh, well said. And I continue to say, like, I cannot analyze the 2029 Utah Jazz. I do not know what that team will look like. I can only analyze what's in front of me. So before we move on, because we got a lot to do, man, the playoffs have been so fun. Let's get the Tom Haberstroh most optimistic approach on how long this is going to take for the Jazz to get back to competition at a high level in the West, and what are the boxes that have to be checked?
Well, Cooper Flagg would help. I think in this draft, that guy is probably year 3 before you start talking to playoffs. I think in most situations, about 3-year runway. With Lauri Markkanen and Will Hardy, I think you can look at year 2 as being a real playoff contender. That's how good Cooper Flagg is, in my opinion. He's that polished and well-rounded that if he's on the floor playing 30 minutes a night for you, you're not going to have that many weaknesses. That's how good he is. And so whether they're going to be contending for a playoff in the first year, I think not. No matter how good you are as a rookie, it's very hard for you as an 18-year-old, which he's going to be, 18, 19-year-old as a rookie. No matter how good you are, it's very hard to be a playoff team right off the bat. I think year 2, you can start talking play-in and playoff potential for the Utah Jazz with Walker Kessler, Lauri Markkanen, and Cooper Flagg. But we'll see about the backcourt. That's going to be key. But for this team, without Cooper Flagg, it's going to be 4 years, 5 years.
Oof. Yeah. No, we'll see. We'll have to see how it plays out. I mean, every team needs that luck for all the – and look, I'm certainly on a day like today, we'll never speak illy of, of Greg Popovich, but he'll be the first one to tell you without Tim Duncan or – David Robinson or Ginobili, you got to have players. You just have to have players. There's no other way around it. And the organization walking line is Will is our cornerstone. He's our building block. Well, he doesn't play. He coaches. This is a players' league leading us to the teams that are now in the postseason. What impressed you most about the way the Warriors went into Houston and won Game 7?
Buddy Hield, man. I did not see that from Buddy Hield. I could not believe that he was the guy who came up huge for the Golden State Warriors, given the pedigree on that roster and the experience on the roster. What Buddy Hield did to punish the way that the Houston Rockets were loading up on Steph Curry is one of the best Game 7 performances I've seen in a long time. It's not just that he scored 33 points. It's the expectation level. Like, Buddy Hield has never been a playoff performer. And, in fact, Buddy Hield, coming into the last season, I'm not so sure he has won a playoff game ever. And so, like, Buddy Hield has never been big in this moment because he's never really been big on a good team before. And so when you see what he did on Sunday night, where he's coming in there as a guy who's never won a playoff game in his life heading into this series, and then coming up big in a 2-7 upset, where he's making everything and making the smart play, moving the ball when he has to, taking advantage and being aggressive when he has to. Buddy Hield and the way that he continued to make himself valuable on the floor was something that I needed to see before I believed it. Like, acquiring Buddy Hield for the regular season is one thing, but to see that Buddy Hield can go 37 minutes in a playoff Game 7 and be one of the best players on the floor and lead the game in scoring is another level and a weapon on the Golden State Warriors that they're going to need in this next series against Minnesota. I don't know about you, Spence. Like, I'm a Steph Curry believer, but I didn't realize that this is going to be the first series in which the Golden State Warriors are the underdog in the last decade. Like, that's astounding to me that they've never been the underdog in a series until now. In the last 10 years. And part of that is the size advantage that Minnesota has. But I still pick the Warriors. I have the Warriors in 7. They've won their last 3 games against Minnesota. That was even before Jimmy Butler. Kevon Looney was not a huge performer in the entirety of this series against Houston, but I think he's going to be big against Rudy Gobert. And if we saw that from Buddy Hield, I needed to see it in a Game 7. That's a new dimension for the Warriors, that they're going to have that release valve when they load up on Steph Curry with that size and they pass to Draymond Green. They can credibly pass to Buddy Hield. and get an open shot and have him hit that. So that was a surprise. That was like in a season finale where they reveal the killer, and you're like, that guy? Like I did not know he had it in him, and I was very impressed with Buddy Hield, and they're going to need it against Minnesota.
All right, let's go back to Saturday. And, there's simply stretches, and this might say as much about the Clippers as it does about Denver, but there was about a 14 or 15-minute stretch between the second and the third quarter when Denver plays like that. You just go, they're as good as any team left, including Boston or OKC. And maybe it was lack of effort from the Clippers. It was just a decent Kawhi game. And you wrote on this, so I will say into this microphone, it was yet another Game 7 failure from James Harden, and you have data to indicate maybe that's not the fairest narrative in the world. But was Game 7 a baller in? Was that more about who Denver can be when they do what they did to the Clips over the second and the third quarter, or was that an indictment on the Clips, or maybe a bit of both?
Man, I think James Harden is really, really difficult to rally around in the playoffs when it gets deep into a series for this reason. He is a 3-shot foul hunter, the likes we have never seen in the NBA. And in the regular season, that works. He is unbelievably good on the perimeter at hitting threes and being able to draw that 3-shot foul. He gets his legs taken out from under him. He exaggerates contact. He gets that call. But as these games get deeper into a series and the referees have seen James Harden and the way that Denver's playing him, he's not getting that call, and Denver made them pay. Look, James Harden is not the biggest choke artist in Game 7s in NBA history. I ran the numbers. I've looked at the tape. This guy has had some duds, but he has shown up in Game 7s before, and his decline from his regular season performance, postseason performance to Game 7, his Game 7 drop-off isn't nearly as seismic as some other players in the NBA. And it's crazy to say this on the surface, but Jokic has had some duds in Game 7, fallen off from his normal performances. I'm not saying James Harden's better than Jokic. Certainly, we saw what happened in Game 7. But the issue with James Harden is he can't shoot in these big moments. He was 1 of 4 from downtown, 2 of 8 for the game, and he, I think, lets the referees and the whistle get in his head a little bit, where he's like, if I'm not getting these foul calls, I have to turn into role player, playmaker. And you saw 13 assists to just 2 turnovers, wasn't looking for his shot. Denver knew that. He had another great first quarter coming out, and it just seems like he loses steam. And the Clippers just aren't young enough to rely on Kawhi Leonard and be like, all right, when James doesn't have it going, we can just go to Kawhi. As the season goes on and the postseason goes on, I just think it's harder and harder to compensate for Harden in a Game 6 or Game 7. And when he shifts into playmaker mode and pass first guy, you need someone who's got that alpha in him. And right now at James Harden's stage of his career, look, James Harden is the all-time leading steals guy in a Game 7. He's one of the best shot blockers in is over a block per game in Game 7s. He's 4th all-time in assists per game in Game 7s. He's got a really good efficiency metric in Game 7s. The problem is he just can't hit threes. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with the officiating and the fact that they were swallowing those whistles and saying, we're not going to fall for it. We're not going to fall for the okie doke. When you fall onto the ground, Denver's going to get that ball, and they're going to go the other direction. There was a possession in the second quarter I highlighted on TomTheFinder.com that signified the problems when you build around James Harden. If he's not getting those foul calls, he's just another guy.
All right, moving over now. If I told you that the Cavs are in trouble, would you – and I felt like this before Game 1. I mean, Indiana, since January, when Rick Carlisle made some adjustments to the rotation and they got healthy, they've just been kind of one of those teams that's a total pain in the ass. And I always try to be fair because I hear a lot of, Donovan Mitchell playoff narratives. And Donovan has had his fair share of when the lights are at their brightest and when his teams have an opportunity to take that next step. He hasn't necessarily delivered. I've also watched him drop half 100 in playoff games a couple of times, and I think he has 5 40-plus playoff games and 2 50-plus playoff games. So it's not like he's never getting it done in the postseason, but there is something about this matchup that if I'm a Cavs fan, man, I'm a bit concerned. Tell me your thoughts.
I'm not. I think this is a make or miss league, and just like in Utah, when you have a team that predicated on 3-point shooting, you got to hit those shots. And you know what? That's true for every team in the league. Like, Indiana shot the heck out of the ball. 19 of 36, made over 53% of their three balls in that game. The Cavs, led by Donovan Mitchell, only had 9 of 38. One of the worst three-point shooting performances in Cavs history. That's not going to do it. You lost 30 points in the three-point column. A team, the Cavs, that normally kill you from downtown, they had a bad night. And look, some of that is scheme, but I think most of it is just the shots weren't falling, and Donovan Mitchell scoring 33 on 30 shot attempts is not going to cut it. I think this is one of those games where Kenny Atkinson just says, next game, let's try to get Darius Garland healthy and try to get those same looks, because on the other side, I think Indiana hit some tough shots, and they were playing harder, and sometimes that stuff gets rewarded by the three-point shooting. But I'm looking at the three-point column and the fact that the Cavs out-rebounded them. They took care of the ball. They shot better than them on twos. And the only thing really that they got beat on was something that they got romped on, is the three-point column. And it was a close game until the very end. And if some of those shots go the other way, I know it's not a very compelling answer, but in a make-or-miss league, when you lose by 30 points in the three-point column, I just think you flush it down the toilet and you go to game two. They might get Darius Garland, one of the most dynamic backcourt players in the league. That will certainly help things. They need him healthy in order to beat the Indiana Pacers, that's for sure. They need Evan Mobley healthy. They need DeAndre Hunter to be healthy. But those things, I'm more concerned about the health on the Cavs side than anything schematically. I thought that game one was as bad as they played, especially on hitting shots and shot making, and I'm not too concerned. I think the Cavs are still going to win this series, but that was not a good first game out of that group.
All right, before I set you loose, in 90 minutes, they're tipping off at TD Garden in Boston, Massachusetts, and I love me some Jalen, and I love that the Knicks are at least relevant again and have been for a few years since, basically, in my opinion, not being relevant since the late 90s. So I like this Knicks team. I know that the Mikal Bridges acquisition and even OG, acquired with the idea of matching up with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And maybe Drew Holiday's compromised, but they still have Derek White, and both those two guards are capable of really making it hard on Jalen. And, Tom, they just asked Jalen to do everything. I feel like nobody's giving the Knicks even a Mike Tyson uppercut, knockout, random, even kind of a chance here. Do you feel the same? What are your thoughts as we start the second-round series?
I got Boston in 5, man.
Yeah, fair enough.
I got Boston in 5.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at this Boston 5-out system is way too good and on another level than what we saw with the Pistons that often had two guys on the floor that couldn't shoot. The optionality that the Boston Celtics offense has, where they got playmakers at every position, they got guys who can shoot at every position, guys who can play off the dribble in every position, and I just think that's so much harder to defend. And then this Knicks team, it's not OG and Mikal Bridges that I worry about. It's the fact that the Boston Celtics have a guy at every position that can hunt Karl Anthony Towns or Jalen Brunson on any given possession. And I'm sorry, but that offense, the Knicks offense, they were a bottom 10 offense for half the season. They were not a good offense against the Detroit Pistons. This Boston team is better in every respect. And I just think that the Knicks don't have enough on both ends of the floor with that 5-man unit with Cat and Mikal Bridges and OG, Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson. I just think that, yes, they were built to try to handle the Boston Celtics, but this Boston Celtics has a different engine in that car. And I just think it's going to be a different series than Detroit. And a lot of the issues that Detroit exposed about the Knicks but weren't quite able to capitalize on, I think the Boston Celtics are going to make quick work of the New York Knicks. I just think the Knicks defense isn't that good. And I think Kat and Jalen Brunson defensively are going to be really exposed in this series.
Where can people get to work, Tommy?
Hey, TomTheFinder.com. I really appreciate people go subscribe to my Substack. Also at Yahoo Sports with Kevin O'Connor and Dan Devine. 2 shows a week over at Yahoo Sports. Go check out the YouTube over there. And, of course, I appreciate Basketball Illuminati listeners. Always a good time on that show. We got Steve Jones joining us, the former assistant coach and video coordinator for the Brooklyn Nets and Memphis Grizzlies, going to join us this week. You've probably already followed him on Steve Jones 20 on Twitter. He's awesome. And we have another great episode coming up on Wednesdays at Basketball Illuminati. Appreciate it, Spence, as always.
All right, my man Tom Haberstroh. We will catch a quick break. Coming up on the other side, Richard Smith rolls through for an entire hour. We'll get his take on the news that Will Hardy has been extended through 2031. We'll do a little lottery, a little draft, and some playoffs. It is time now to start thinking about your lawn. It's chilly, it's kind of rainy, but the weather will turn, and if you're not taking care of your lawn now, it's time to consider it with our friends at IFA Country Stores. They have everything you need to care for your lawn, no matter its size or shape. Their 4+ lawn care program can promote healthy green grass this summer. Visit with their team of Pro Turf and landscape consultants that help provide products and services to local baseball and soccer fields, golf courses, parks, and other city properties throughout Utah. It's the same knowledge and care that they share with you about your yard, only at IFA and online at ifa.coop. Smitty joins us coming up on the other side right here on ESPN 700. All right, coming up at the end of this segment, we are giving away one round of golf to Davis Park, which is a great track up north. It is the Festival of Tees. I have tasked Smitty with coming up with a trivia question, an NBA Jazz-related, maybe draft-related trivia question that he's going to drop on you coming up. We'll call that about 20 minutes from right now. And the first person to text in the answer, we're going to send you up to play Davis Park in honor of our Festival of Tees, brought to you by the UGA. So stay tuned for that. And live in studio, fresh off a trip down south where he was watching some of the world's greatest LPGA golfers play at the Black Desert Championship, is Richard Smith. Smitty, how are you, man?
Man, it was a fun weekend too, Spence. Great golf. You know, you watch the women in the LPGA up close, and you recognize quickly how precise they are in everything they do when they get over the ball and they get ready to hit it. Everything is lined up. Everything is just textbook. I mean everybody, every single player. I was just fascinated by how precise and distinct they are when they get over the ball. Whether it's on the tee, in the middle of the fairway, on the green, it was fun to watch, fun to be a part of.
Course in good shape. The highlights looked awesome.
Course was in great shape. The Black Desert administrative people down there, they just they go all out to make sure that tournament, the course is ready to go, and I think the players loved it. And look, the winning score by you was 26 under, and the winning score last fall in the PGA by Matt McCarty was I believe it was 25 under, and so the players love it. The players love the course, and it's a scoreable course. It's not. There's a lot of places you can't get in a lot of trouble as long as you hit the ball pretty straight. I mean, you're going to be rewarded.
Well, I almost broke 80 there. I can't relate to what the pros do. Is it hard for you to deal with your newfound celebrity status after coming on this radio program now for over a year?
Yeah, this is tough.
Like I'm sure people were coming up to you left and right, like, aren't you Smitty from The Drive?
Well, I had that, but fortunately, the radio station here is kind enough to send 2 bodyguards with me wherever I go, and so that takes care of a lot of the crowd issues.
Good. Well, great to have you in on a day like today, where some unexpected news dropped that the Utah Jazz and their head coach Will Hardy have agreed to a contract extension through 2031. And Smitty, as you know, Will was hired in 2022 after Quinn left, and they gave him a 5-year contract with 3 guaranteed years and then 2 years of team options, which they've already picked up. So prior to today, he was under contract through 2026. Now he's under contract through 2031. This is pretty rare. I mean, for a coach to get a 9-year runway, right? And so I wonder what you make of the decision of both the Jazz to offer and Will to accept.
Well, first of all, I think the Jazz are smart because they have a guy in place that they've worked with now every day for 3 years. So they've had obviously an expansive ability to look at what they think about him. It's not so much, obviously, as we know, Spence, at the current iteration of the Jazz on the floor. It's not about the wins and losses. It's about setting a culture, setting an approach, a philosophy that you feel your organization can wrap its arms around and can be part of going forward over a long-term basis. They've obviously looked at that the last 3 years and determined that Will Hardy's a guy they want to work with long-term. He's a guy that they feel fit what they're trying to get accomplished there, and so it's a great idea for them to lock somebody up like that that they feel comfortable with, that they feel is doing things the way they would like them to get done. On the flip side, for Will Hardy, it gives him, obviously not just some coaching stability and longevity, but allows him the idea that, hey, these guys believe in me, and so I've got to do whatever I can to return that faith and that trust by working hard every day, by trying to get us better, by trying to get this program back on track the way we all want it to be. And so it gives him an inner peace. And it's not just about the length of the contract and the money and all that kind of stuff, but it's about the idea that obviously the people I work for have this kind of trust in me. So I have to do the best I can to return that to them in terms of how I do my job.
So, Smitty, as you know better than anybody, these coaches oftentimes are hired to be fired, right? This is a profession and an industry with tremendous volatility. And oftentimes a new owner comes in and it's like, if you buy the house, you're going to put your own furniture in. If you buy the house, you want to remodel it so it's what you want it to be because it's yours now. So I get Will Hardy jumping at the opportunity to essentially, like I said, have a 9-year runway between the day he took the job and the day his contract expires. Now, does it mean that he's going to be here for 9 years? No, we know the deal. I mean, he could be fired tomorrow, and who knows what's going to happen. So, and certainly this year with the coaching cycle, Taylor Jenkins losing his job after doing a great job in Memphis. Michael Malone wins a championship 2 years ago, and that's not enough to allow him to keep his job and coaching a team that was and still is in the playoffs and was really good. It's a wild industry. And I get it that if you're Will, you jump at the opportunity to do it because you have security in a space where there really isn't security even for some of the greatest that we've seen. But is this a risk for Will? Because, and, you know, I keep talking about this, 21 years since the Charlotte Hornets have won a playoff series, 21 years since the Kings have won the playoff series. The Detroit Pistons, who once upon a time were a great, great team back in the day, have not won a home playoff game since 2008. You were part of several front offices that were able to pivot quickly to get back to competitiveness. They're not close. And whenever I talk about any of these really long playoff droughts, it's a reminder to our community how lucky we've been about how quickly front offices that you were a part of were able to pivot to get us back. If we're honest and we're looking at the Jazz roster and we juxtapose it to the teams in the Western Conference playoffs, they're simply not close with the talent that Will has in the locker room. Is this a risk for Will to decide he wants to sign on for this long-term project with no guarantees that you've got the talent that you need to compete heading this way anytime soon?
Yeah, I'd push back on that, Spence. If you're a coach and you're getting offered a multi-year contract extension with any organization, you're going to take that primarily because, as I mentioned a minute ago, it's two things. One, you're getting that kind of support from the people you report to, that we like you, we believe in how you're doing it, you keep on doing what you're doing, and we're behind you, and we're giving you this kind of support to make that happen. And then the other part is, as a coach, you want to be in a position where you can show that you can improve the situation you're in. You can get a team better. You can get players better. And the stability it brings and the confidence it brings to someone is really something that you have to take in large measure. There's a smaller part of it, Spencer, nobody ever talks about, which is simply that there's a real world issue to this. And that is that if you're a Will Hardy and you're in a position like that, you have a house payment to make. You have children to feed. You have a family to take care of. So, you know, if you get an opportunity to sign a deal like this, to be able to be part of something that you believe in, that you think has a chance to improve with your input and your leadership, and the organization is saying, hey, yeah, you're our guy. This isn't some, what I call sometimes, Spencer, a fake extension where the guy got an extra year put on his contract because he had a good season, which we see a lot of times in professional sports. The organization went out and said, we're going to give you this extension for another 6 years, you know, which is a long time for someone who, quite frankly, hasn't had a winning record. You can say we haven't had the players. He hasn't been able to do that, okay. But obviously they believe in his approach and his philosophy enough to say the wins and the lack of wins to this point really doesn't matter. We believe in how you do your stuff. We've been around you for 3 years. We know that you're the kind of guy that we want leading our group going forward. And all of that is symbiotic. You know, they help you, you help them. Everybody's in it together, and it's a big moment for the organization to all be on the same page in that regard.
With Greg Popovich stepping down, and I do want to get to that in a moment, Eric Spoelstra is the longest tenured coach in pro basketball, 17 years in Miami. Steve Kerr, 11 years in Golden State. The third longest tenured coach is Tom Thibodeau with the New York Knicks, 5 years.
There we go.
So if Will coaches through the end of his contract and it's 9 years, it would make him the third longest tenured coach as we currently sit here. And that underscores your point, doesn't it?
If you get there, right? If you get to that point.
Right.
I mean, so Tibbs is the third longest tenured at 5 years. There's 30 teams in the league, Spence. So you're talking about the third longest tenured guy. There's another 27 teams that are after him who have had coaches less than 5 years. I mean, come on. How do you expect to gain any traction? How do you expect to have any stability in your organization to be able to build upon something when you just keep stopping and starting, hiring a guy, firing a guy, changing general managers, changing the head coach? That's why you see a lot of these organizations can never get anything going, because they don't have the patience. They don't have the foresight to be able to see that if you get something in place that you think makes sense for you, that you want to keep that in place over an extended period of time so you have some longevity, so you have an ability to get some traction, to get some footing, to see what's going on. Obviously, the Jazz front office led by Danny Ainge, Justin Zanuck, and then their ownership, of course, with Ryan and Ashley Smith, have looked at it and said, we want Will Hardy to be here long term. That's the only way we can put some stakes in the ground and continue to drive this thing brick by brick by brick. And that's the commitment they made today.
I'm not even going to ask you to guess who the fourth longest tenured coach is. If you want to, go ahead. But you would have.
How about Ty Lue?
Ty Lue is fifth.
Okay, Ty Lue's fifth.
The fourth,
off the top of my head, Mark Dagno.
It's not. He's sixth.
Okay. I'm in the vicinity, right? Hold on. Let me scan it quickly.
It blew my mind when I read it, because I feel like he was hired yesterday.
Quickly, Chris Finch.
It's Billy Donovan.
It's Billy Donovan.
In Chicago.
Okay.
I feel like they hired him last week.
Yeah. See, and Billy's had, they've had uneven results, right? They've had uneven results, and they've had a team that they put together a few years ago that they thought, could be sustainable with Lonzo Ball and Zach LaVine and the big kid, and they just they couldn't get any. They were okay, but not great. But they've stayed in that gray area. See, and that's what the killer thing is in the NBA, Spence. Is if you're an organization, if you're an owner, we always would say you want to be one of the top 5 teams. Or if you can't be that, you want to be one of the bottom 5 teams to have a chance to improve your situation going forward. If you're one of the middle 20 teams, it doesn't make any sense. You're not going anywhere. That's what's happened to this point with the Chicago Bulls. They've gone with Billy so far because he's proven that he's a winner both in college and in his days at OKC, but you have to have some stability. You have to believe in what you've got set up in order to give yourself a chance long term to have some sustained level of success. They haven't had it in Chicago, but obviously to this point they've stuck by their guns, and part of it's their roster thing that they've started to remake also in this last year.
So, speaking of Greg Popovich, we heard from Coach Pop today for the first time since November of 2024. And I got to say, it kind of made me a little sad. And, I'm old enough now to have seen people and coaches that I loved and respected in this league age. I can remember the first time I saw Jerry after I heard that he wasn't well. And Jerry and his wife, Tammy, were good enough to invite me to a playoff game. And I sat with them, and it makes you sad, when you see Jerry Sloan, who you're used to being that demonstrative leader, just kind of age and not look like the way that he did. And seeing Coach Pop today kind of made me sad. He spoke very softly. You could tell he's been through Helen back, and he lost his bride a couple years ago. His wife of, I think 40, 50 years passed, and obviously he's had the stroke that clearly has had a detrimental effect on him. I wonder, Smitty, if you could put some color and context into a conversation that's happened over the years a number of different times, which is the synergistic approach between the San Antonio Spurs and the Utah Jazz, and how Greg Popovich has spoken often about how he wanted to use Coach Sloan as a model. There was this great clip that was going around after Pop broke Coach Sloan's record for wins with an individual team. A reporter asked, I know that wins and losses aren't everything to you, but you did break Jerry Sloan's record. And Greg paused and said, I'm not in his league, and I never will be. There was always this reverent respect between Coach Popovich and Coach Sloan. You had a front row seat. I wonder if you could provide some context to that.
Yeah, Pop would always say that, early on, remember in the early 90s, Greg Popovich was the general manager of the San Antonio Spurs. He had Bob Hill as his coach. They decided to make a change. The ownership did in the mid-90s, and they put Pop in the coaching seat for the time being, and he stayed there for what seemed like forever. They also, let's call it the way it is. You can be a good coach, and I've heard many coaches, say this along the way, whether they want to take credit or not. But what makes a good coach is good players. And Pop had the good fortune of coming in right at the time when he had David Robinson in his prime. The ping pong balls that year fell their way. They got Tim Duncan, happened to be in the draft that year. It just happened to be the year that David Robinson missed 70 games during the season, and they
with a
missed
back
the playoffs.
injury.
Yeah, and so they got in the lottery, and they ended up with the number one pick in that year. In that draft, just happened to be Tim Duncan. So now they got Tim Duncan, and then they got lucky, with the Manu Ginobili pick, which was late in the second round. He was playing in Italy. And they took him as kind of a lark, and hopefully that they could get him over at some point, which they did. And then they took Tony Parker, who everybody thought could be a decent player. Didn't know if he could be a point guard at the NBA level or not, if he was an undersized two. And he came in with that group. And again, Spence, it's not just about you as an individual, but all the players that you're with, and how you coalesce with each other, and how you work with each other. And Tony Parker was the beneficiary of playing with three other Hall of Fame level guys, as it turned out, and they had the terrific run that they did. But Coach Pop was always very complimentary of Jerry Sloan, and always talked during the 90s while the Jazz were running the show. The Jazz didn't win a championship. They played for two of them in the finals. But also during the decade of the 90s, Spence, a lot of people either don't know or have forgotten the fact that the Jazz won more games in the 90s than any team in the NBA. They won
including Chicago.
They won more games than the Chicago Bulls. They won more than the Lakers. They won more games than anybody, okay? They were a competitive team and a championship level team for a lot of years. Didn't work out. Had a couple of, last-minute shots by a guy named Jordan that won a couple of finals games. Okay, that's the way it goes. But Pop always said during that time, we're trying to emulate our franchise after the Utah Jazz, the way they conduct themselves, the way they're coached, the way their front office runs their business, all of those kinds of things, which was always a very nice compliment. And he continued to say that whenever the opportunity would come up, even after they were winning multiple championships, to say, well, I remember talking to Sam Presti one time at a game we were both scouting down in Phoenix when Sam was with the San Antonio front office before he went to Seattle, and that became OKC Thunder. And I remember him saying to me, well, Smitty, we're just trying to be like you guys. We're trying to figure out how the Jazz do it and do it the same way, and which is the ultimate compliment when someone is saying they're trying to do things the way your organization does it. But the Jazz had that kind of reputation all during the Miller ownership because of the way things were handled, especially with Jerry being at the forefront, and of course the Ladens running the office in the 90s, and then Kevin O'Connor in the 2000s, and Dennis Lindsay in the 2010s, and had such a great run. But you have to. Part of it is you have to have the players. You have to have good players to be able to compete. That's the main thing. But behind that, you have to have some level of stability and some continuity to what you're trying to do. And the announcement today that the Jazz have given Will Hardy this long extension that says we want him to be the guy leading us on the floor and giving us that kind of continuity and stability says a lot about what they think of Will and also what they think about how they're trying to conduct their business long term.
All right, Smitty, you ready to drop a trivia question? I'm going to do my read, and while I'm doing my read, I want you to come up with a good Jazz draft-related. You got one?
I got it. I got it in my head. I got I got to think of if I get. Yeah, I got it. Okay.
I'll do my read, and then you drop the question. It's time now for the ESPN Festival of Tees, powered by the Utah Golf Association. Each day of spring, ESPN 700 is giving away rounds of golf to the best courses in the state. Listen to the Down and Dirty with Scott Mitchell from 10 to 11, the Sean O'Connell Show from 11 to 2, and, of course, this program, which is called The Drive with Spence Checketts from 2 to 6 for your chance to win each day from ESPN 700 and the Utah Golf Association. Details can be found at ESPN700sports.com. Now, Smitty, it's got to be a good one because we are sending a lucky listener to Davis Park, which is one of the most underrated tracks that we have in the state. I love that course.
Hopefully I'm going there Thursday if I can get on.
That a guy.
One of my favorite places.
Okay, so today's Richard Smith trivia question is what?
Yes. I'm going to throw this out at you for our movie lovers as well.
Okay.
And our Hollywood people, okay?
All right.
There's a famous actor in Hollywood. His name is Jason Segel.
Okay.
He's worked in a lot of TV shows, a lot of movies. I think a lot of our listeners may know him as a very successful actor. Well, Jason Segel, when he was in high school, played on the high school basketball team with a former Jazz player. We want our fans to figure out who the Jazz player is that Jason Segel played with in high school. Spence, go.
I can't say it into the microphone, and I'll be honest with you. I don't even know the answer. Usually you drop a trivia question, like last week it was the second rounders. I knew it was Millsap and Mo. I honestly don't know what the answer is. So you internet sleuths, get to it. Jason Segel played high school basketball with a former member of the Utah Jazz. First person who texts that in to 877-353-0700, we're going to send you to Davis Park, one of the best tracks that we have in the state. All right, we'll catch a break. We got 2 hours down on a Monday. We got 2 hours to go on a Monday. Coming up next, the NBA Draft Lottery is 1 week from today. What's the emotion like in the front office when you have a lottery pick that could mean so much? We'll also do some playoffs. Round 2 starts tonight. Richard Smith live in studio for another big segment. Coming up on the other side right here on ESPN 700. All right, not to give you the answer to the question, but the former Jazz man who Jason Siegel played high school basketball with, it's actually up on his Wikipedia page, so you can find it a lot easier than I thought you could. Smitty, I got to say, let's get Smitty's mic on. I got to say, the most surprising part of this little rabbit hole you set me down is to learn that Jason Siegel won a slam dunk contest his senior year in high school.
Well, Spence, first of all, why are you giving like clues to people to go where find the answer? Like this is,
Smitty,
I mean, this is like like the high school. You're like the high school teacher says, "Yeah, I just want to get these kids out of the class. I want to get out of here." So you give them the answers to the test. And
respectfully, sir, my guess is that a listener who probably has already been able to get the answer simply Googled Jason Siegel and went right to his Wikipedia page. I'm quite sure I did not give some crazy clue out there. That would be my guess. Porter, do we have a winner to go golf at Davis Park?
We do. We do.
Okay, so then we can
you can expand.
So then we can say that the high school teammate of Jason Siegel was one Jason Collins.
Yes. He played with at Harvard Westlake, which is a very prestigious private high school in the Southern California, LA area, and both Jason and Jaron Collins went to Harvard Westlake, and from there, obviously, got recruited, both of them, to go play at Stanford collegiately, and then they both had very extensive NBA careers. And Jason Siegel decided to fake left, go right, and ended up going south. Instead of going north to Stanford, went south to Hollywood, and that was it.
Do you know if Siegel was a good player at all? I mean, according to this Wikipedia page, those teams won state championships, but my guess is that's more about the Collins twins than it was about Jason Siegel.
I would say so, but I don't know. I don't know any of. I just I only know that because one time in some conversation I was having with Jaron, it was just like some random thing that came out. I think somebody had mentioned something about a movie at a dinner one night when we were on the road, and Jaron Collins said, "Yeah, that's funny." He goes, I gotta call him and tell him that or something. I can't remember what it was about. And somebody said, "What do you mean call him?" He goes, I played in high school with him. What are you talking about? You played in high school with him? Jason Siegel. Yeah. No, he's a friend. I'll call him up right now. We said, "Get out of here," and he said, "No, I'm serious. He played with us at Harvard Westlake." Okay, that's what I knew of it.
Okay.
I didn't know anything about a slam dunk contest. I'd heard that or something. Jason or Jaron, one of them was supposed to be in a slam dunk contest or something, and they deferred and said, "Hey, let Jason do it. Let him do it. Whatever. Give him some props.
Okay, Jason Siegel has never struck me as like a great athlete, just like one of those big, loopy Ben Hanlogden type dudes.
Ben Hanlogden.
Shout out Ben Hanlogden, right? Shout out our guy Ben Hanlogden on Monday.
Stuff out there.
I want to see Jason Siegel dunk. I'm very curious about this. Anyway, we can move on. Smitty, 1 week from tonight, and I just found out this morning, we will have the draft lottery live on our radio station. Coming up next week, 5 o'clock straight up, we will say goodnight a little bit early for our show so we can bring the draft lottery to you guys. And I can't remember a lottery as consequential for the Jazz as this one could potentially be. As a guy who scouted and was part of war rooms for decades, what's it like over there, as far as their preparation for next Monday?
Well, I mean, they're preparing just for the draft in general.
Sure.
Obviously, they have no control. This is one of those things we've talked about before, Spence, where the Jazz have certain things under their control that they can work at to try and get their team better, which is, how you draft, who you draft. Obviously, they've had several picks in the last couple of drafts, and the jury's still out. I think at least my own opinion on all of those guys, whether they're going to be, substantial NBA guys of any sort. But you could control those things and how you do your scouting and how you do your evaluation. But then there are things that you don't control that just happen to you that could potentially fall in your lap that can help or hurt, what you're trying to get done. And, of course, the draft lottery in a week is going to be one of those things that can help or delay what they're trying to do. If they get the first pick, which is they're going to go into it with a 14% chance of getting that first pick, then they would most likely, as everybody would think, be looking hard at drafting the freshman out of Duke, Cooper Flagg, who I think is going to be a very good pro. I think he's going to be a very good player. He's going to remind people when he comes in the league, whoever he plays for, of to me, some kind of a combination of Gordon Hayward / Larry Bird type skills, because he passes the ball. He's a team player. He's smart. He gets he plays both ends of the floor. He's not the shooter that Larry Bird is. I think he might be a little bit better defender maybe than both Larry Bird and Gordon Hayward early in their careers, because he's a very competitive guy. He's a tough guy. He also has some ability to actually be a rim protector at his size. At 6'9", he has very good instincts as a help defender. And so he's a guy they're going to be looking hard at, whoever gets the number one pick. And I really think there's an argument to be made between him and the Dylan Harper kid out of Rutgers, who I think is going to be a terrific NBA point guard, because he has the size at 6'5", 6'6". He has the mentality. He has the toughness. He's a great pick and roll guy. He's a very good free throw shooter. He doesn't mind getting in the lane, taking hits, getting knocked to the floor, get up, go to the free throw line, knock him down. He's got some toughness to his game. So I like both of those guys. If the Jazz end up with the first or second pick, it's going to be interesting.
9 times in the draft lottery for the Jazz, which is stunning. If you think about it, 50 years of Jazz basketball, 9 lottery appearances. Of course, the lottery as we know it started in '84 with my guy, Patrick Ewing, landing in New York. Sacramento has been in it 27 times. Golden State, 23 times. Charlotte, 23 times. Philly, 19 times. The Lakers, 14 times. 9 times is pretty stunning. I mean, that goes to what we were talking about earlier, how quickly you guys were always able to pivot and get back to being good.
Well, the Jazz over the years during the Miller ownership, obviously they had great teams with Stockton, Malone, who a lot of people know about their Hall of Fame careers, but a lot of people aren't aware of the fact that the reason they were good for so long is that for 13 of the 18 years that Stockton and Malone played together, neither guy missed a game. So they
say that into that microphone one more time.
This is the thing, Spence. At that time, we used to play 8 preseason games. They would always play in all of the games because they wanted to play and get ready for the season. Jerry wanted them to play to make sure everybody around them, knew how to play with them and all that kind of stuff. So they would play 8 preseason games. They would then play 82 regular season games. That gets them up to 90, and then they were always in the playoffs. So every year, Spence, for 13 of the 18 years they played together, both John Stockton and Karl Malone played in the neighborhood of 100 games every year. And then next year, they played in 100 games again. And then the next year, they played in 100, and then the next year, and then the next year. And so Jazz fans became spoiled by that, obviously, because those guys never got hurt. John's one injury he had during his entire 19-year career was his knee in '98, in the early season '98, where he missed 16 games, and Karl Malone during his 18 years with the Jazz missed a total of 12 games, and the thing that a lot of fans don't know, Spence, is of those 12 games he missed, 8 of them were because of league suspension. They weren't because of injury. They were because he knocked down Isaiah Thomas, or he elbowed this guy and whatever, and got whacked a game or two here and there, But Karl missed 4 games because of injury or illness in 18 years, and it was funny because during that time, it was almost like they were competing against each other to see who could be the most durable. Like, well, he's got the flu, right? Is he playing tonight? Yeah. He said, well, then I'm playing.
John and Karl had that relationship.
Yeah, I'm not going to let him. Yeah. I'm not going to let him get ahead of me.
Iron sharpens iron.
Yeah. And so then you had the changeover when they left in 03-04, and then you had the quick turnaround in the summer where Kevin O'Connor was able to convince both Carlos Boozer and Mehmet Okur to come to Utah and a quick turnaround. Then the following year, draft Darren Williams, moving up from the 6th pick to the 3rd pick, and have a quick turnaround with Andrei Kirilenko and Ronnie Brewer, and had a very competitive team then. And then, of course, the turnaround when those guys were gone with Dennis Lindsey and drafting Donovan Mitchell at 13 and making the trade with Denver, and drafting Rudy Gobert, of course, at 27, and buying that pick also from Denver. That's always a thing that's interested me, Spence, is with all the success Denver had with Tim Connolly at the helm in Denver in the 2010s, they would have the exact same team that they have now. The guys they drafted Jokic, they drafted Murray, they drafted Porter. They could also have Gobert and Mitchell on those teams. All they had to do was draft them or evaluate it the same way as the Jazz did. They didn't, but those are guys that they could have had just by picking them when they had their picks come up. And that just illustrates how fluid the draft can be and how different teams evaluate and look at players when you get into that situation where you have to make a decision between A and B. It becomes very interesting.
Jazz have moved down 3 times. They've never moved up, and they've stood pat. I misspoke earlier. This will actually be the 10th lottery appearance for the Jazz. So they've moved down 3 times. They moved down last year where they had the 8th best odds, and they picked 10th. They took Cody Williams. Year before that, they stayed at 9. They took Taylor Hendricks. Going all the way back to 2004, Chris Humphries was the pick at 14. Martell Webster, technically the pick in 2005, but that was the deal you guys made for Darren.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you moved up to 3 to take D. Will. Let me ask you while we're in that space, how early in that process were you guys on Darren? Because for our listeners that may not remember, that was the Chris Paul, Darren Williams debate, right? And how early in the process did you guys identify we want D. Will?
Well, it was a debate because also in that mix, Spence, was Raymond Felton.
That's right.
So we had the top point guards in college at the time were considered Darren Williams from Illinois, Chris Paul from Wake Forest, and Raymond Felton from North Carolina. And so it was a race to the finish line, if you will, between those 3 guys as to who teams thought might be the better pro, who teams liked in different regard. D. Will, he wasn't the so-called slam dunk pick. It wasn't him all the time. There was a lot of internal debate, a lot of discussion about the different pros and cons of those guys. I would say that Raymond Felton was a little bit behind Chris Paul and D. Will in terms of the horse race to the finish line, so to speak. And at the end of the day, the Jazz made the decision. They liked D. Will's size a little bit better. They liked his, maybe his toughness a little bit better. Hey, you can argue it either way now. Chris Paul's still playing and has had a Hall of Fame career, obviously. Darren Williams, the first 4 years or 5 years he was with the Jazz or something. Our teams played Chris Paul's teams. I think D. Will was like 7-2 against Chris Paul or something or whatever. But a lot of that has to do with the team you're on as well. But and Darren Williams is also part of 2 Olympic teams that won gold, and so people forget how good of a player he was early in his career with the Jazz. But you can argue Chris Paul. Yep, he's had that career, and he was, would be a Jazz type of guy. And at the end of the day, I think it was just decided that, we liked the idea of a little bit of a bigger guy, a little bit more size that we could put on the floor, and that's how that decision went down.
Who did you want?
I'll be honest. I was really mixed with those guys. I could see the argument for both of them. I like the D. Will size thing a little bit. Chris Paul is 6 feet, but he showed some toughness. When I saw him play in college at Wake Forest, he had a couple of games where they got into a little skirmish on the floor, and he was right in the middle of it and wasn't backing down from anybody. So you could see that he had some internal toughness that would serve him well. looking back on it, I would have never said, well, one guy's going to finish his career, and then the other guy's going to play 5, 6, 7 years after that guy. I would have never said that either way, because you can never know how those things are going to play out. But I would say the room was very mixed, and it was very it wasn't like lopsided, like we got to have this guy and whatever, and table pounding and all that kind of stuff. And I think Jerry liked the idea of the size a little bit too in the lineup. So
that's actually what I wanted to ask you, because I had always heard, and look, Chris Paul has always been my guy. So like I think 2005 may have been my first year on air full time. And so I can remember draft night without any knowledge of what you guys were going to do. When I saw that you had traded up, I stood up off my couch and I said, Chris Paul is going to be a Jazz man. And I was so pumped for that possibility. But you had heard over the years that it was Jerry. And look, I know you guys all collaborated and Kevin was that type of leader, so I'm not saying it was a monolith. But how much truth is the old adage that Jerry is the one that said, I like the bigger guard, I want to go with Darren?
Well, I think that's what he felt like, But Jerry, this was one of the great things about working with Jerry Sloan all the years that I was fortunate enough to do this. He was great during the draft in that he would watch film of guys. He would come into our group meetings. He would be prepared to offer his take on what he saw or what he thought on film. But he was always, Spence, the first guy to stand up and say, look, I have an opinion. I think this about, player so-and-so. But you guys, meaning the scouts and the guys who go out and research it all year and see him in person and do all that, you guys work at it much harder than I do. And you guys have studied it much longer than I have, and you have a better feel for it. So I will give you my opinion about this, but I am not going to, try and override anybody's opinion. You guys do it, for your day-to-day business. I'm going to end up going with what you guys think, and that was one of Jerry's great attributes, was that whatever job you had, Spence, whether you were, the front office scouting personnel guys, whether you were one of the guys who worked for the public relations group, whether you worked for the marketing group, whether you worked in the ticketing office, whatever your job was that happened to intersect with what Jerry's responsibilities were as a head coach, he was always the best I've ever been around at saying, hey, I could override this decision to, make some public appearance for the team on a Tuesday afternoon or whatever and say, no, we're not going. But Jerry would say, well, Patty Bally, our PR.
Shout out Patty Bally.
Yeah,
yes.
Community relations person for a long time. Patty says we have this thing tomorrow at 3. So we have the thing tomorrow at 3. And, some players might go, oh, I don't want to go, or I got something. And he would say, hey, I don't know what to tell you. Patty said we got to be there at 3, so we be there at 3. And that's why everybody loved working with him, because everybody, no matter what your responsibility was, everybody knew that Jerry had your back because he understood the time and the effort that you put into doing your job to the best of your ability. So, and likewise, when it came to the draft, he would have an opinion, but he would always finish it by saying, but you guys know it better than me, so whatever you guys think.
So ultimately, final call back then made by Kevin, I would imagine. Kevin was the guy, yeah.
Yeah, it was Kevin. It would be Kevin, and, if there was any kind of, pull and tug or, nose line at the finish, Jerry and Kevin would hash it out, and they just, but I'm telling you, I can't remember a time when Jerry ever said, hey, this is the guy, come on, what are we talking about? He always would say at the end, well, Kevin, you guys know, so you guys decide whatever. Because Jerry felt, very comfortable saying that, because he also felt like at the same time, so I hope you will reciprocate when I'm the coach.
Don't tell me to play.
I'm making a decision in the fourth quarter of a game, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to hear after the game that you're second guessing me or, saying, well, you should have done this or that. I mean, that was never said, but it was always understood that Jerry's giving you your space and he's allowing you to do your job and he's with you in that regard. And he hopes that you reciprocate, with the same kind of support, for him and the job he was trying to do.
See, I find this to be really fascinating, and I don't know how it works currently over there. Will Hardy was asked during his postseason media availability, how involved are you during the draft process? And Will said, I'm very involved. He will be in Chicago for the draft lottery. But I believe, I'm a firm believer. I've always been a firm believer in just front offices that I've had a chance to be around, that it is important to have one final voice who does make the call. I do think the best roster constructors have a team of people around them who they talk to and they take input from. But at the end of the day, you've got to have one guy who's brave enough to say, no, this is my call, even if he doesn't necessarily agree. And that can bring mixed results. And, the way that Ernie Grunfeld and Pat Riley worked together, Pat was very much a part of it, but he allowed Ernie to make the call. And then it was the same thing with Grunfeld and Van Gundy until it wasn't, and those two got loose, and a decision had to be made. I've told you before, I can remember being in the war room when Ed Tapscott went rogue and just drafted Frederick Weiss when most of the Knicks scouts wanted Ron Artest. What is the best way for that to work? Because I think it's probably fair to say if there's one voice that makes the call over there, my guess is that it's Danny's. It's never a good idea for the ownership group to have the voice. I don't know if Ryan wants to be the guy that actually makes the call. If it is, I think that's horrible news. My guess is that the voice is Danny's. That's my guess.
Mm-hmm.
But there's Justin Zanuck. There's Will Hardy. Any thoughts on the synergies over there now?
No, I don't. I'm not there, Spencer. I have no idea. I would assume that that's why Ryan Smith brought in Danny Ainge, and who's been in the NBA at all levels.
Yep.
And has made it his life's work, and you bring a guy like that in who had retired, who was living his retirement life in Utah County, and just trying to have a quiet life. And Ryan Smith went and got him and convinced him to take up this project with the Jazz. And so I would make it just a guess that that he's relying on Danny Ainge's ability and instincts and knowledge and all that stuff of the league to be the final decision maker on between A and B. With our groups that I was part of all the time, it was always the person who sat in that decision making seat, whether it was Scott Layden or whether it was Kevin O'Connor or whether it was Dennis Lindsay. They were the guys who had the control of that, and they were all very collaborative guys. They listened to everybody in the room. They gave everybody a chance to have their voice heard. They would, and we even had a couple instances. I can remember where Kevin O'Connor made decisions on some stuff that he didn't tell anybody about, and then after the fact, we would say, hey, a week later, a month later, whatever. So, hey, what was that thing about that? What was that deal? And he would say, hey, I had to make a decision, but I didn't want to implicate any of you guys because if it didn't work out, I felt like that's not fair to you. I'm the guy in the hot seat, so I deserve to get all the blame, or have all the slings and arrows, aimed at me if it didn't work out. So I didn't want to tell you guys that we were going to do that because I didn't want you to be part of that process because that's my job to have to deal with that. And so, and again, those are the kind of guys you want to work with because those are the guys who have your back and respect what you bring to the process and how hard it is to make those kinds of decisions.
All right, Smitty, before I set you loose, nobody is giving the Knicks a chance. Nobody believes the Knicks have a chance to beat the Celtics 4 times in 7 tries. Neither do I. All right, so New York goes out and they make the move for OG Anunoby. They sacrifice their draft capital for Mikal Bridges, 2 big wing defenders that, in theory, can at least provide some pushback for Tatum and Brown. Where I think this is just untenable for New York is Drew Holiday, Derek White on Jalen. Because, look, Tom Thibodeau has forgotten more about basketball than I ever know. But when I watch the Knicks offensively, there are so many possessions where it's 1-4 flat or isolation and Jalen has to do it all. And he's so good. At times he's able to pull it off. But 4 times in 7 tries against who I think the best team in basketball is. Round 2 starts tonight. Do the Knicks have a Mike Tyson uppercut chance 4 times in 7 tries?
Yeah, well, you always have a chance, Spence. Look, that everybody's starting with a clean slate. You don't know somebody's going to have a Buddy Hield night and go off for 33 points off the bench, or Jason Tatum is going to twist his ankle in game 2 and he's going to miss several games. You have to play it out. I think the Knicks, made the right moves in getting guys like you just mentioned, and Anunoby and Bridges, because if you have a chance to get those kind of guys and you have a chance to be competitive with whoever the other teams are, then you have to take that opportunity. That's what you're in the business for. You're in the business to compete. You're in there to try and give it your best shot. Maybe it's not good enough, but you take it and you go to the jump ball and you see what we got tonight. And then if it doesn't work tonight, then we make some adjustments and we go to the next game and so forth. But that's what it's all about. And so, I think they have a chance. I don't know what that will look like, but again, you're going to have the best version of the guys you have, for a vast majority of each game in order to have a chance. But that's, as they say, Spence, that's why they play the games.
Yes, sir. Hey, great to see you. Are you in town for the foreseeable future? Are you on some exotic cruise?
No.
Or what's
Look,
the deal?
I'm gonna be on pins and needles a week from today to see what happens with the draft lottery. I'm gonna be sitting in my lucky seat and have all my fingers and toes crossed and do whatever, and we'll see how that all plays out.
All right, my friend. Well, great to see you as always. We'll see you next week.
Okay, man.
All right. The great Richard Smith. We'll catch a break. We got more to do coming up on the other side on a Monday edition of The Drive right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. You know, it just works on so many levels. When you start listening to the lyrics, you know, it just, I don't know, man. It's one of the bits I can't quit. And you know the deal. When we play Limp Bizkit on this radio show, it's time to welcome in club legend, future Hall of Famer, Trey Fitzgerald. Who's the Hall of Fame?
It's about time you got the intro right.
Who's the Hall of Fame named after again that you're going to be inducted to? Some NWSL, like, you told us this weekend I better be there when you're inducted into the whatever Hall of Fame.
There is a Colin Jose Media Award.
Okay.
At the National Soccer Hall of Fame.
And Colin Jose was a NWSL.
He's the archivist for the NASL, you know, the league that formed the foundation for the sport in this country over the last 50 years.
How do we get you on the list for that award? Or do you actually have to work for it?
Good question.
Okay, just out of curiosity. Hello, Trey. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
It's great to see you live in the studio. If you've ever wondered what Trey looks like and why the Limp Bizkit music works so well, don't do that. Don't throw deuces up. Log on to our YouTube channel. Trey is in studio. I always appreciate your time coming down. All right, let's just start with some big picture stuff with the club because it's been a rough start and it's been a little chaotic behind the scenes with the ownership transition. The primary transfer window comes and goes with a couple of additions, but no additions that I think a lot of people were either hoping or expecting when it came to a DP. The Bozanique deal with the Portuguese club falls apart at last minute. So what's the past month and a half been like for you guys?
Yeah, it's been, I think, energetic. It's been dynamic. I think in all ways it's been positive. Even the Bozanique deal falling apart, it was, that happened as a result of, I think, Kurt and company drawing a line in the sand and saying, you're not going to change from euros or dollars to euros at the last minute and ask for a bunch more money.
That was the deal.
And move the goalposts and change the terms. And, I think Kurt got to a point where he felt like if we met their demands, it would set a bad precedent, and it would also kind of hamstring us a little bit in the summer. So the Agata trade was made with Sporting Kansas City. We haven't really seen him much yet. He did play 45 at Vancouver. Played, 22, 23 at San Diego. Clearly, he's a talented player. He scored 2 goals against us last year. I guess in my mind, maybe he ends up being, over the longer term, more of the Anderson Julio replacement. And, Chicho was really good for San Jose the other night. And I think that'll be Kurt's focus in the summer is a killer 9. And you referenced the ownership change. Every experience I've had with anybody on the Miller side in the months leading up to the official public announcement has been nothing but amazingly positive. And, look, Spence, I never once thought that RSL would leave Utah or move from Utah. But, Commissioner Garber and others, they said with the Miller family being the majority locally engaged owner, there's never a doubt. And, the Blitzer group is still very much involved, especially on the sporting side. We've got some young academy products that are over in Denmark with Brøndby right now, and they're going to get some cups of coffee around some of the different teams in the continent there. That's exciting stuff for the development of a kid. It's not probably super exciting for our fans that are worried about first-team performance over the first third of the season, but I guess the saving grace right now, as I try to look at things glass half full, is we've got 25 games left across all competitions. So there's plenty of time to kind of turn the ship around. 4 wins, 7 losses in MLS. We're only, I think, 6 points out of second place, which is amazing. 7 points maybe. Go to Dallas this weekend at the end of a 3-game road trip. Dallas just got smashed. So if we can get the 3 points there, take 6 out of 9. The Vancouver loss is disappointing, but they're the best team in the league. So for us to have kind of maybe not embarrassed ourselves against them is a moral victory, which obviously don't count for anything.
7 points out of second, in fairness, 2 points out of 14th.
Okay, yeah, tightly packed. It's early days.
But look, I bring it up for context because over the course of the 20 years now, which is still wild for me to think about, of the existence of the club, some of our best teams had horrible starts, and some of our worst teams had awesome starts. This season, almost unlike any other, is an absolute marathon. This is not a sprint, so I'm not ready to anoint or dismiss. But I do think there is a faction of this fan base that looks at, and I want you to walk us through this because you've been around the league forever, and it is a single entity policy continuously, so you cannot draw a straight line by doing all of the math of every player you let go and saying, why don't we spend every one of those dollars on a player transfer? That's not how the business model works. Right. However, it is, I think, understandable for a fan base that saw potentially 15, 18 of the most exciting games that we've ever seen here last year with that group of attacking players be broken down brick by brick without adequate replacements. I think that's fair, Trey.
Yeah, I think it is fair. The whiplash from a year ago to now is certainly, I think, exacerbating the situation because you do go 15 games in the league unbeaten for the better part of March, April, and May. You're in first place. You're in the Supporter Shield race. Chicho's got 17 goals in 17 games, I think, at that point. You sell Andres. Chicho scores 1 goal in his final, 20 games, let's say, maybe a little less, over the second half of the season. It was a stumble to the finish after you sell Andres. Now, it's not – I think people forget that, okay, you sell Andres for $11 million. It goes to $13 with some bonuses. All that money isn't paid up front. You take $5 million of what you get from him, and you buy Diogo, you buy Dominic Marchuk, you buy Lachlan Brook, you sign Javane Brown off of waivers from Vancouver. So it's not like no resources were used and everything was pocketed. That's just not how it works because – some of these dollars are real cash dollars, as you've heard Kurt explain. Some of the GAM is not real cash. It's fictional kind of capology, if you will. I think, the Chicho move was calculated. The Matt Crooks move was maybe a little late, and it was right by him. He's doing very well in the championship over in England. But I think now, through the first 10, 11 games, we've realized how much work he did for everybody else, and you're missing that. Now, what it's done is you're allowing Diego Luna to become the man, as Pablo said a couple weeks ago. He's not on the ascent anymore. This is his team. He's the man. Maybe that's a lot to put on a 21-year-old's shoulders. Maybe Dominic has not – he's been, I think, positive, but he hasn't been as consistent as he was in the final 7 games last year. Ari Piol clearly learning on the job. Agata and Russell we've hardly seen. Box to box, I think everybody feels really good about the core of the team. And Anelli and Ojeda and Glad and Vera and Junca and Katranas and, maybe right back we've had a rotating cast of characters. Rafael Cabral has been phenomenal. But we don't have those difference makers, the Chicho and Andres that we had a year ago. Nobody other than Diego has really stepped up in that category.
Well, and I think it might be time, and maybe past time, to have a salient, honest conversation about Diogo, who has the same amount of goals as Sam Junca right now, right? He has a goal, and he has 2 assists in 11 games. And, last year he rolled into town with a lot of fanfare and was not productive. And the walking line was, we need a preseason with him.
Yeah.
He's your only DP. And from my vantage point, he hasn't been good enough. So maybe you guys are seeing things in training or moments where, he is providing the quality that you want from that position. But at what point do we look at that and say, I don't know, man, it hasn't worked, Trey, so far.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple ways to look at it. And, talking to Pablo and Kurt daily, as I do, I think Pablo looks at Diogo and says, okay, this is a guy who played 31 Champions League games. Clearly there's quality and pedigree. Different league, different style of play. He was not the man in any of those situations at Copenhagen or Benfica. He was the man behind the man or the man behind the man behind the man. And the other thing that Pablo has said consistently in his Apple production calls is Diogo is a very smart technical player. He's an incredible finisher. When he's on the field, he's seeing the game, in Pablo's estimation, 2, 3, 4 steps ahead. but nobody around him is seeing the game at the same cadence as he is. So there's a disconnect there, right? He's surrounded by an awful lot of youth. And again, these are all just making excuses for him, because if he didn't have those two DP initials next to his name, I think the perception of his contribution, his performance would probably be very different. So I would expect in the summer you add a DP, maybe that DP, that presence of that other DP would hold him accountable in such a way. Maybe he leaves. I don't know. It could be one situation or another. His wife just announced on Instagram a week ago that they are expecting their first child.
Congratulations.
So you never know how some of these off-field things are happening. Like, you've heard the guys talk about, Dominic's kind of choppy start to the beginning of the season can be attributed to the fact that his dad has been very unhealthy, and he's been 5,000 miles away from that situation. And, Dunny's been talking about this for years. You just never know how some guys are very good at compartmentalizing the 90 minutes on the field and everything else off, and other guys, it bleeds through and it affects them. So the good news is things haven't frayed, right? Like, guys haven't turned on each other, and all you can hope for is improvement day by day, hour by hour, and game by game.
So the explanation for Diego is that he's too good. He's too smart. And he's too evolved.
It's just not on the same page.
Okay, well, he's got a kid next to him who clearly is seeing the game the way he supposedly is, but at least Diego is producing. 6 goals, 2 assists, another goal over the weekend, a PK finish against Vancouver. You've had a front row seat to watch this kid develop, and I know that some RSL fans don't love that I wax poetic and talk about some of our great superstars back in the day. But for me, Trey, he has the ability to be better than all of them.
Yeah.
And I hope most of those years are here. I get the deal that probably isn't the case, but what's it been like for you to watch this kid blow up and evolve into really a rising star in the ranks of soccer across the entire country?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, Diego clearly came here as a older teen, and he's a man now. He's got a kid. He's very serious about his craft. He is, I think, the biggest area of growth for him is maybe holding teammates accountable. Whether it's in training sessions, it's in film sessions, it's in the middle of the game.
And they respect his voice.
Oh, yeah. And he will grab a guy by the collar like Jason Kreis used to do and say, wake up, let's go.
What is wrong with you, Matt Banky?
It was Luke Kramelmeyer is the vivid one in my...
The laser, please.
Maybe Tino Nunez as well.
Shout out, Adolfo Gregorio. I can keep going. I can play this game all day.
Diego, Apple is asking him to be an ambassador. MLS wants to use him in everything. Landon Donovan and Tim Howard want them on their podcast. He's done, he did the Andor thing with the actor Diego Luna. Travis Scott had him out to Coachella. These are things that don't typically happen to a Real Salt Lake guy, no matter how many goals you have. And the thing is Diego's matured, but he hasn't really changed. He's still a good guy that you can walk up to and dap up and just have a good conversation with. His If I was 21 and suddenly the world was acting like I was important, I would expect my ego to probably outgrow its efficiency, And look, part of what's great about Diego is his belief in himself and, that quiet confidence. But he really has put this team on his shoulders. He's got, 2 2-goal games. He's made Team of the Week 3 times. So I think again, I don't know what's going to happen. I expect him to be here for a year. I think that gives him the best chance to go to the Gold Cup here in a couple months under Pochettino, and then really give himself a chance to make that World Cup team a year from now. And the U.S. soccer assistants that have been around, clearly Pochettino loves him. They love his grit, his grind, his attitude on both sides of the ball, and he's not afraid to try stuff. And we saw it in the Nations League, whatever, semifinal and final, or third place game, I should say, where the U.S. lost to Panama and Canada. He was the lone bright spot. He was the only guy trying things. He was the only guy making things happen for himself and for others. So sky's the limit still for a 21-year-old Diego Luna.
Bit of a non sequitur, but you referenced RSL players at Coachella. And so I've got to ask you about Nick Raimondo being inducted into the Hall of Fame. Nick is a known music festival guy.
Absolutely.
But, little history lesson. I can remember one of my wake-up calls to, professional soccer in America is much different than professional soccer or professional basketball or professional football, the sports I was raised around, when I found out that our starting keeper in 2007, Scott Garlick, had elected to retire because he had an opportunity in real estate.
Mm-hmm.
Good for Scott. Apparently it's worked out for him just fine.
Seems like it.
But ultimately, I can remember thinking like, wait, a athlete in his maybe later prime is retiring when he has a contract to keep playing to work in real estate. So we were scrambling to get a keeper and ultimately went and reacquired Nick Raimondo from D.C., right? New York, where Bruce Arena.
Correct.
Okay, so we were able to acquire Raimondo in the deal that also brought us Freddie.
Yep.
Freddie Adu, which did not work out as well as we were expecting. We did not know that the better piece of that deal was actually the keeper that we were receiving, who turned out to be one of the main conduits to lifting trophies, and by most accounts, the greatest keeper this league has ever seen. So your thoughts on Nicky getting inducted into the National Hall of Fame, the only RSL player to have this honor.
Correct.
I would imagine Kyle gets there at some point.
I would hope Kyle can get in the next year or two. Nick Raimondo inducted in the National Soccer Hall of Fame in Frisco, Texas this weekend. We will celebrate Nick on June 14th against DC United at America First Field in Sandy, and Nick will get his name put up in the Ring of Honor next to Jason Kreis and Javier Morales, and clearly the three of them were teammates together on that MLS Cup 2009 championship team. Nick Raimondo was named the MasterCard Most Valuable Player.
MasterCard's the sponsor?
They were then up in Seattle against Galaxy. And Nicky's just been, for a guy that never won the Goalkeeper of the Year award, which is insane.
That's pretty wild.
He should have won it the following year in 2010 when RSL only allowed, I want to say, 20 goals in 34 games. And the reason Nick didn't win that year, I was told, was because Borchers and Olave were ahead of him, and they both made best 11, but Nick didn't.
That's silly.
It was very silly. But anyway, Nick's second act of his career was here, right? He won a cup in D.C., but he had suffered a knee injury, and he was considered damaged goods. And to your point, we traded for Freddie Adu from D.C. in like November. Nick Raimondo was a throw-in in that deal. I think we sent Jay Nolly and a draft pick the other way. And then Nick ended up we traded him to New York because he wanted to play for Arena again.
And we wanted Garlick, right?
And then, we had Garlick from the first couple years, and then Garlick retires 2 weeks before the season, and Bruce Arena told John Ellinger in, March of 2007, who do you want? You can have Nick back, or you can have John Conway, who was a decent keeper at the time. And Ellinger goes, I guess we'll take Nick. And then Nick plays for us for another 14 seasons, leads MLS all-time in minutes played, games started, saves, wins, all the important goalkeeping categories. And some of these records, Spence, are most likely untouchable because Kyle, Nick, others were kind of a rare breed, Pablo, that played their entire 14, 15 years professionally in MLS, and some of them have played the majority of those years for one team. We're seeing it now. Diego Chara up in Portland has played his entire career with the Timbers. So there's a few examples here and there, but we're so glad that Nick made a home here. He operates businesses here. He's the goalkeeper coach for the Monarchs, spends a lot of time with our academy kids as well. And, I think Gavin Beavers and every other young keeper that's come through our club would credit Nick with some of their development.
So moving back over to the here and now, because there are some bright spots other than Diego, and I talked to Pablo about this last week because, as you know, I was on the road with the club in San Diego.
You're a good luck charm.
Look, folks are saying that. I'm not saying that, but folks are saying that. You elected to ditch me on the trip, which is fine. The trip worked out just fine for your boy. We'll leave that off there. But watching the win against San Diego, and Emeka's been good for a while. Dude, he controlled the entire flow of the game. And I talked to Pablo about this, and you remember this funny anecdote that I always share about Kyle Beckerman.
Yeah.
Because I can remember this was 2007. Jay took the head coaching job in 07.
May of 2007.
Okay, so
4 games in.
So he had Kyle at holding mid, which is Kyle's, the position that he became a legend at the club. Yeah. And, of course, me still learning the game of soccer, Kyle scores one of his Becker bombs, we used to call them, this 30-yard blast, and we were having trouble scoring. So on the post-game show, I say to Jason, hey, dude, I've got a great idea for you, buddy. Kyle needs to be playing up top. He needs to be playing striker or central attacking mid. And Jason gave me this look like, I will strangle you right now. But I'll never forget what he said to me because it turned out to be prophetic. He said, if Kyle embraces this position and what I'm asking him to do in this diamond formation, he will play in a World Cup, which he did. And so after that conversation with Jason, I watched Kyle in a different way than I had prior to. Because, like people focus on the ball. They focus on the touchdown pass, the dunk. Unless it's Jokic, it's a layup because he can't dunk. Or in soccer, it's the goals. You focus on the moments, right? So after watching Kyle just dominate the way that he did at that position, it gives me a different set of eyes to watch Emeka evolve the way he's. And there's a little Kyle in Emeka. I thought. So as far as bright spots, if we're going to go there, I think Emeka continues to evolve.
Yeah, and what Pablo consistently praises Emeka for is his brain, his intelligence, his ability to process information. And, Emeka has the fortune of playing the same position that Pablo and Kyle played for 15 years at a very, very high level in this league and in this country. And Emeka is constantly taking what Pablo is teaching him, whether it's in film sessions, training sessions, or just grabbing him during the game and say, hey, when you're in this situation, check over your left shoulder because that's where they're going to try and whatever. And, Emeka, 25 years old, in the national team mix. I think he's played the second most minutes for the field players for us this year. Clearly our leader. Johnny Russell's presence now is going to, I think, help Emeka accelerate his leadership side of his game and his captaincy. But, we wouldn't even be in the middle of the pack in the West without Emeka and Ojeda, which I think are one of the better midfield tandems in the league.
And finally, another bright spot I do think has been Cabral. I do, the keeper that Kurt decided to bring in. It was just difficult last year watching Zach, who at times I think stepped in here as a veteran and played some really, really good soccer, looked like it was orange slices and juice boxes. Like these mistakes that he was making were just wild. And I think most people believe Gav's going to be great once it's fully cooked and he's fully developed. I was glad you guys addressed it because you needed to. So tell us a little bit about this new keeper, and we'll finish it up.
Yeah, I mean, Rafael Cabral is a little older. Before we got Johnny Russell, I think he's our only player over the age of 30 with Zach on the shelf, rehabbing his shoulder. Cabral won a Copa Libertadores when he was young, very prestigious South American competition. Won titles with Napoli in Italy, played in England at a high level, and then played in his home country of Brazil the last couple of years at a very high level. He is a consummate leader. He is not a perfectionist because when he is trying to teach people how to learn from their mistakes, he's very cognizant about acknowledging his own or that he will make some, that he's not perfect. He loves his family. He loves his faith. And he's really been extremely solid. We saw this weekend he's now saved 2 of the 4 penalty kicks he's faced this year, which is big when it seems like there's a game-changing penalty or VAR call almost every week now. And I think we're lucky to have him. So if we get Brian Vera back, you have Justin Glad healthy, that's a very good spine when you can go Cabral, Vera, Glad, Ojeda, Anelli, and then Diego Luna at the central 10 up top. You got to build around it. We need guys to step up around it. Xavier Gozo, 18-year-old homegrown from Eagle Mountain, is clearly rising to the occasion. Hopefully that lights a fire under Dom. He can get back out there. There's a lot of soccer left. I think everybody's together. Everybody's optimistic, but we will see what moves Kurt and company make this summer. Porter, you going to be tuning in to the playoffs tonight? Because here's where I'm at.
I have so much respect for Jokic that I'll say gentleman's sweep. But do you think OK sweeps Denver, or do you think it's in 5?
I actually think this series goes 5 games.
It's 5 games. Okay. 5 games.
Look,
Hey,
Jokic,
Trey, it's great to see you.
Jokic doesn't dunk because he shares the ball with AG because, as you know, an assist makes 2 people happy.
It's great to see you.
Nuggets in 6.
Stop it. See, this is why we can't
No,
do
they're going to
this.
get a split in Oklahoma City. They're going to win the 2 at home. They lose 1, and then they win game
This is why we
6
can't.
at home.
This is why we can't talk
Okay.
NBA.
Let's bet a Black Desert round on this.
Seriously?
Yeah, I'm dead serious.
Let's bet 70.
70?
Let's bet 100.
You're
going to
pay for all my golf for the rest of my life?
Let's bet $5 million right now. on
I don't
OKC
have
Denver.
access to that kind of funds.
Well, I don't either, but that's why I'm happy to go ahead and lay it down. Look, I'm pulling for your guys because I know it makes you happy to see Denver win. Have you watched OKC at all this year?
Yeah.
They are impossible.
Impossible to watch with a shameless grifter Alexander shooting 25 free throws a game. Are you kidding me?
You see this?
That's all going to dry up in the playoffs.
This is why we can't talk NBA when Trey's here.
He has a small point about the fact that the translation is harder in the playoffs to get to the free throw line that much, to rely on it so much. But is that going to play into a account against this Denver team?
Who do you anxiety watch more than any other team?
Anxiety watch?
Yeah, like when you're is it RSL? Is it Denver? Like
I don't have a ton of anxiety because I know that Murray or Gordon are gonna get it done.
Never mind. All right.
It's probably RSL. Yeah.
Okay, still to this day.
And maybe there were a lot of rough Bronco watches over the last 8 years.
Yeah,
So I mean they finally got a quarterback.
Hey, at least you have some hope. All right, so it's Dallas coming up this weekend. RSL's been on the road, but they will be back home for a Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday the 14th at home against Portland, and then we head off to Colorado, where I will be at Ball Arena for Game 6 as Denver clinches the series 2 nights before RSL
Will you turn this
beats
mic
the
off?
Rapids.
I'm trying to give you guys a little love here. Oh, okay, you get back for 4 or 5 at home in June. Okay, just feel like the club's been on the road.
Yeah,
forever.
we get back for I think it's 9 out of 11 at home after this long road stretch.
Gotcha. Good to see you. Thanks for the time.
Thanks for having me.
We'll catch a break. More coming up on the other side on ESPN 700. All right, let's get a Drive at 5 time, Monday afternoon style, about 13 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock. Your commute home on this chilly, cloudy, and potentially rainy tonight, Monday afternoon/evening, begins right now. Big news of the day today, unexpected news of the day today. The Utah Jazz and their head coach, Will Hardy, have agreed on a contract extension that runs through the year of 2031, which means Will Hardy's going to get a 9-year runway if he coaches his entire contract to start his NBA head coaching career, which never happens. We talked about this earlier with Greg Popovich officially stepping down. The longest tenured coach in the NBA is Eric Spoelstra with 17 seasons with the Miami Heat. Steve Kerr has been coaching the Warriors for 11 years. The third longest tenured coach in pro basketball is Tom Thibodeau, who's been coaching the Knicks for 5 years. The fourth longest coach is Billy Donovan, who's been coaching the Bulls for just over 4 years now. So this is a great opportunity for Will Hardy, who now has some security in industry and a profession that has very little security. Speaking of Tom Thibodeau, the Knicks and the Celtics are playing right now on TNT. 8-7 early on for the New York Knicks. The Nuggets and the Thunder will get going tonight. It is round 2 of the NBA postseason. 5 o'clock hour of the program today brought to you by friends at the Daybreak Home and Garden Show, May the 16th through the 18th. It's the ballpark at America First Square. It is 11111. How did they get that address? Ballpark Drive in South Jordan. Check out the website, which is thebesthomeshow.com. So listen up, homeowners. Spring is in the air. The birds are chirping and the flowers are blooming. Is your home and backyard sanctuary ready to enjoy the coming season? Go check out the new Daybreak Home and Garden Show, coming to the ballpark at America First Square, May the 16th through the 18th. This new show will have something for every member of the family. Vendors galore, home, garden, and patio, free games for the kids, free DIY seminars, and hourly free prizes. Come tour the exciting new tiny home from Box House and tour the new Bees Ballpark. Get your tickets now. This will be the most exciting, fun, educational home show ever. Wow. And it's in Daybreak. Get tickets and information at the besthomeshow.com, sponsored by Bullfrog Spas. All right, we get some playoff basketball tonight and some playoff hockey tonight. We have the Panthers and the Maple Leafs coming up. It is round 2 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. The NHL draft lottery is going on right now. The Utah Hockey Club has a 1.5% chance of grabbing the number 1 overall selection. Of course, we are 1 week away from the NBA draft lottery, where the Utah Jazz, along with the Washington Wizards, will have a 14% chance of grabbing Cooper Flagg. Utah football landed a transfer portal target today as former Cal and Notre Dame wide receiver Tobias Merriweather is committed and signed with the University of Utah. They add Merriweather to a wide receiver room in addition to the former Southern Miss wide receiver Larry Simmons. So Tobias Merriweather is the second receiver commit in the past week, 13th offensive transfer, and the 20th commit in the transfer portal class for Coach Witt. And his transfer portal additions prior to the fall coming up in just a few months. All right, we'll catch a break, but we're going to bring in Richard Smith coming up next. We'll do some Jazz basketball. We'll talk about what it's like behind the scenes right now, 1 week away from the lottery, and his thoughts on Will Hardy grabbing a contract extension, all before we say goodnight at 6 o'clock on a Monday afternoon right here on ESPN 700. Kenny Atkinson has been named the Coach of the Year in pro basketball. NBA playoffs tonight, Knicks and the Celtics. And then it is the Nuggets and Oklahoma City. So round 2 getting going. The Utah Hockey Club did not win the draft lottery. They will draft 14. They had a 1.5% chance of winning the lottery. Porter, trivia time. The NBA flattened. Here we go. The NBA flattened their lottery odds in 2019. So we've had 5 drafts where the worst team in pro basketball has a 14% chance, along with the other 2 teams in that category. How many times in the 5 years has the worst team in the NBA received the number 1 overall pick?
0.
Not one time. So we are 1 week away. Will the Jazz become the first team?
Well, you're telling me there's a chance.
I sure am.
Yeah, I mean, that's the funny part. We can prognosticate, but it literally is based on a couple of ping pong balls flying in the right direction. And you know what? What do they have? As good a chance as 2 other teams, right? 14.3% between 3 different teams. Utah has that opportunity. And I don't know. I got good vibes about it. I don't think they're going to drop a bunch. Like there's some PTSD from Jazz fans that I don't know they should have, because they look at these numbers where the Jazz have never moved up in the draft lottery. They've always moved down, right? Yeah, well, they've also not really been in that situation very often. So you're looking at a very, very small sample size that doesn't really have much historical significance, because, hey, the Jazz have been in the playoffs like every year of their existence, and the lottery wasn't even a conversation for 2 decades. So I have good feelings about it, but that doesn't go anywhere.
No, it does not. We'll be hoping for good things. Having Cooper Flagg in our market might make our national NBA guests pay attention to the Jazz.
Yeah, they would.
Well, because the past couple of years when we have them on, I'm like, hey, let's do a Jazz question. Like,
hey, Tim,
what do you want to talk about? Johnny Juzang getting minutes? Like, I don't know. All right, before we catch a break, I want to tell you about my friends at Advanced Window Products. Nate Orchard, mayor of Sac Lake City, longtime NFL player, and obviously Jake Weber, just great people. Great family-owned business. You get $2,500 off when you buy 10 windows or more. So definitely check them out. Now, here's the deal. If you need windows now, it's about to get really, really warm. And if you need new windows, you should act on this now. Because if you don't get your windows replaced, the warm weather rolls in, and ultimately you're going to be spending a lot of money keeping your house cold because you haven't upgraded your windows. But if you anticipate needing new windows, maybe let's say in the fall before it gets really cold, guess what you can do? You can also save $2,500 off then if you just call now and get on the schedule. All right, so give them a call, Advanced Window Products, at 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100, 801-850-9100, or visit advancedwindows.com. Don't miss out. $2,500 off when you buy 10 windows or more. All right, Porter, before we catch a break, what comes our way on a Tuesday edition of the radio show?
On a Tuesday, Spence, well, we'll talk a little NBA. Hey, maybe some Jazz with Tim McMahon, the NBA Daily Assist. Talking some NBA playoffs. Tony Park stops by the program. We'll talk some hoops, talk some baseball, go all over the map with TP. Plenty to get to with our friend Spencer Linton. No football, no basketball, nothing ongoing, but still a lot of rivalry talk that we can dive into there. And we heard today from Will Hardy. In the meantime, between today's show and tomorrow, we're going to hear from Bill Armstrong of Utah Hockey Club. So we'll go there.
Wait a second. Let's not catch a break just yet, because I may have misspoke. I'm watching the NHL Draft Lottery live here, and I think the Utah Hockey Club just got the ball they needed to move up. Can we stay on air for another 30 seconds?
Yes.
Okay. So let's just wait here for a second, because initially Utah at 14, the first couple of draws eliminated them, I thought, from moving up. But if what I'm seeing here is correct, let's just wait for a second here. The Utah Hockey Club has moved up to number 4 in the draft lottery. Okay, so what I saw was they were eliminated from the first or the second pick. The Utah Hockey Club just moved up to number 4. There's a smiling Bill Armstrong on television. Holy smokes. Well, there you go. Little draft lottery luck on this Monday.
And we'll get the reaction from Bill on the show tomorrow.
Yes, we will. So Bill Armstrong will join us tomorrow, the day after the Utah Hockey Club moved up from 14 to number 4 in the lottery. Some good vibes here. We need it. 1 week away. Maybe our NBA team will get some good luck as well. All right, we'll say goodnight. Special thank you today to Tom Haberstroh, Richard Smith, and Trey Fitzgerald. For any of the sound you may have missed from the show today, log on to the website, which is ESPN700sports.com. Make sure to download our mobile app and take us on the go. The ESPN 700 app is available in the App Store and the Google Play Store. Then finally, for what we do every day in our space, 4 hours every afternoon, check out our podcast page. Give us your support. The Utah Hockey Club moves up 10 spots in the NHL draft and will get the 4th overall pick in the first round. Man, that's some cool stuff. For Porter, I'm Spence saying goodnight. Enjoy your Monday evening. We'll talk to you on a jam-packed Tuesday edition of the program featuring Bill Armstrong and the Utah Hockey Club, who will have the 4th overall pick. Have a great night. Talk to you tomorrow right here on ESPN 700.